Well, time for another due diligence. I'm here with my new friend, and what are we in Discord? Discord mates? Discordians? Uh,
Disc Bros.
Disc bros. Okay, I can go with that. This is Shane Clanton. I've up until recently, I didn't even know your name was Shane. It was just holographic bagel. So,
Nice. Yes.
you know what? I don't think you've explained why holographic bagel. So why don't you say a little bit about yourself? But also, I need to know about the bagel thing.
Sure. Yeah. It is interesting because I've been on Discord for about 8 years or 7 years, something like that, since like pretty much right after it launched. And I had a whole different persona, and I had a whole online community and following of people that knew me only as Clash, Clash, which was the my Star Wars name, right? It's the first 3 letters of your last name combined with the first 2 letters of your first name. So I was Clash, right? And that's how everyone knew me. And I was like, the last year and a half, I've really kind of moved away from that, area of my life where I'd kind of found, I just an addictive tendency to like want to feed into that. I've got people that want to hear from me about stuff, and it's, Star Wars related, and it was fun. I loved it. But over the last year and a half, I've really been getting into my spirituality and into sort of who I am as a, not just human with a brain, but with a soul, and how that all works. And I went through a pretty, intense process of wrestling with that. And my wife ended up, uh, you know, going and doing an ayahuasca ceremony back in February of this year. And that sort of motivated me and gave me some confidence that maybe I could benefit from that, even if it wasn't, as life changing as maybe her experience was. Maybe that there's something in there for me. So I went and I did my ayahuasca ceremony in May of this year, and during one of my nights of ceremony, I ended up having, only one vision. I only had one sort of like mental thing that I really saw, which was this sort of donut looking shape that was sort of spiraling, and it kind of had a translucent, holographic view to it. I just thought it was a bagel of some kind. So I was like, well, that seemed like I saw some sort of a holographic donut or bagel. And I kind of kept that with me. And every time I would meditate, it would show up, and I would see it in many places. And then someone eventually said, oh, well, what you're noticing is a torus. And it's like one of the, sacred geometries of all, existence. And I was like, well, if I'm going to start a new Discord, might as well, be the thing that like keeps coming up in my mind. So that's where holographic bagel came from. So that helps.
So many interesting things there. The first part is that you mentioned a donut before you said bagel. So I just wondered, like in that experience, did you see donut first and then went, no, not healthy enough, and switched it to bagel? Like, was that even because you just did it here? And I'm like,
I did. Well, yeah, because that's how I thought about it. I thought, well, is that a donut? And then I noticed there's like no sprinkles on it, so it obviously couldn't be a
oh,
donut. It must be a bagel.
well, no, you can have a all dressed bagel or a sesame seed bagel.
But I only see like the Simpsons donut whenever I vision a donut. Like everything else, like yes, there are donuts, but this, I was like, if I'm gonna make this something that really bagel, I'm gonna do bagel. And also, it also related to the fact that like over the last year and a half, I've been sort of a stay-at-home dad, and so I've got my 2 little ones that I've been preparing lunches for every day, and every day they get, because this is what they want, they get a mini bagel with cream cheese.
Oh, yeah.
Goes in there. So every day, I am every day of the week, I am dealing with a bagel every morning. So it's really centering to me now. I'm like, oh, I'm one with the bagel. The bagel is me. Here we go.
Interesting too, like the clash thing, because like,
Mm-hmm.
while you said it, I was doing mine, and mine would be Walsey, which is just doesn't even ring for me. But if you hear the
Mm-hmm.
word clash and you think like punk rock, because that was
Mm-hmm.
a band, and just like a bodygraph, or you get something that resonates from human design. Like, did that clash was just like, this is it, at least for now. Like, this is, I'll lean
Yeah,
in for a bit, right?
it was. Yeah,
Yours
yeah.
is way cooler than Walsey, so no wonder I never stumbled across that. So interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So
So
that's where
you're
that came from.
when was the ayahuasca experience? Like hers was in January, so yours was, you said, like, because you've been
Yeah.
in design and kind of found it as part of that experience, right?
Kind of. Well, I so Yeah, hers was in February, and then after hers, I signed up. Which there's a little bit of month lag between you. Okay, I'm gonna do this versus like when there's a ceremony available for it. So I think I signed up in March, and the earliest I could get in was in May. Um,
Hmm.
and so from March to May, that sort of 3 month span, I started getting into I started reading a lot more. I think the first book I read was The Power of Now, which obviously I think a lot of people have read, and it's really impacted me in a meaningful way. Then I read The Law of One, or I started going through some of that material, and which sort of dovetailed into A Course in Miracles, which is another. Those are channeled works, meaning like, and we can talk about this later with human design, but it was where someone was channeled through an entity, and they recorded it both sometimes just with an audio recorder or with a video recorder as well, and they wrote all these books from spirits or entities that live in other parts of the universe, and really powerful writing, honestly, and really powerful channeling if you've ever seen that stuff. But then
Mm-mm.
it eventually got me into, someone introduced me to Gene Keys, which I really resonated with. I was like, okay, this makes a lot of sense for me. Just going through the sort of path that I was on, and where I'd been in my life and where I was hoping to go. And eventually I was like, well, I know that this is sort of based on human design, and it's got some, deep ties to it, but I didn't really explore it until after my ceremony, which was, I think up in the early June timeframe is when I really started getting into human design and trying to understand what it meant for me, because I was lacking the context that I needed to with just Gene Keys alone, considering it kept coming up. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Okay, I want to go right into what we talked about earlier. Maybe we just because it's right there. Like you found gene keys and worked backwards to human design.
Mm-hmm.
I think I heard of gene keys after
Yeah.
because human design was part of my little shamanic weekend, and it was
Yeah.
question they asked me that was so profound. Like it was like like I answered sacrally to it
Mm-hmm.
and felt it and
Mm-hmm.
really suddenly knew what that was. But like with Ra, I mean, his was just a download of consciousness and in 1987, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore has been and needs to be and should be and updated since. So it is these mutations that are coming from Richard Rudd and Gene Keys and Sphinx Code and all these other things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very, very interesting. So this is a conversation I'd like to explore. Um, the notion that there's this voice, and someone was saying the other day that Ra said it was a female voice, like a husky, or so it was someone else's voice, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not convinced. I think after all the psychedelics I've done and self hypnosis and that state of and MDMA and that
Mm-hmm.
state that you can access. Honestly, I think that 8 day download was just a medicine amplified his inner voice talking to him, right? It wasn't someone else's voice. It was an accumulation or synthesis of a bunch of stuff he had learned, uh, and that kind of hit him in that moment, channeled it in that moment, right?
Yeah. So then I guess that raises a good question, because prior to 1987, most, if not all, of the sort of quote unquote respectable like works like that, didn't matter how far back you go, right? They all say they were divinely inspired, or they were channeled works, or everyone has some sort of mechanism by which they gained inspiration or gained the epiphanies that they did, or the downloads that they did. And the ones that kind of like set the tone for a lot of them were things like the I Ching and the Kabbalah, and the Bible, and there's the works of Buddha. Like there's just so many different variations of the sort of the same idea, that like we're here as a spirit living a human experience, and the one thing you should always remember is that love is at the heart of all of it, and there is no separateness and things like that. But for this one, for Ra specifically, how much of the human designness of it was like truly novel, right? In that it was like, it wasn't touched on elsewhere or explored elsewhere, where he could have sort of blended it into his own subconscious from somewhere else? What was unique about it, I guess, is the question.
Well, he combined a bunch of stuff, right? Like it was really. I remember him saying or reading somewhere like his vehicle was the right vehicle to receive it at that time. He had reached some sort of threshold, right? And he was
Mm-hmm.
the right. Really, I think the grizzled, grumpy old lighthouse keeper vibe served him. Like it basically allowed him to just be this tenacious messenger of this thing. Because can
Yeah.
you imagine? Like I saw this one video where it's like I think one of his very first introductions publicly. So he's there with like those transparent slides. And he's
Mm-hmm.
wearing the little hat, and he's
Mm-hmm.
you know. Can you imagine mostly the ridicule he would have had after that? Like
Mm-hmm.
you had to not give a shit what people thought of you. Like you were just like, I know this, and I'm gonna put myself out there. And because he's talking
Right.
about neutrinos, and I know at the time, like he was talking to the science community about neutrinos have mass, and I'm sure half of them were like, "What's a neutrino?" And then the rest were like, no, they don't, and then later it was proven they do, right? So how he knew that, I still think that it's like maybe just the right investigation and research across a bunch of things that just made that obvious to him, and
Mm.
he spat it out and
Mm-hmm.
vocalized it, right? So yeah,
Has
I
there
guess,
been anything he's predicted that's been wrong?
well, it's come from his filter, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even this 2027 thing, like it sounds harsh, but he was harsh, right? Like if really what we're heading towards is collective consciousness and we want it to be positive, that message needs to change. All right,
Right.
or we're like words or spells.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna speak this prophecy into existence by continuing to uh, echo and amplify that. What if we
Mm-hmm.
changed the frequency of the sheet of music that's being played a bit, right?
Right. Right.
So I think that's my hope through all this. And then
Yeah.
and it's I'm sure you're seeing this. Like there's those that are taking it and going, "Yep, this is great. I'm going to take this and move forward," and they mutate it, and they get a lot of even discredit or uh, criticism by like the OGs who are like, "Nope, Ra said this," and
Mm-hmm.
like human design is not a belief system, but it seems like some of the OGs believe it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Versus,
I've run into that already. I mean, I've only been in the experiment now for whatever it is, 5 months, and I fully agree. There are some people that I immediately met. I'm like, I've been through various institutions of religion, and I'm like, you sound like someone that has like taken it as dogma, and like now it is your job to protect the dogma of the religion. And I'm not looking for a religion. This isn't what I signed up for. So if that's how the community is like, I got to find something else. Luckily, there's way more people out there that aren't as zealous in terms of their hard and fast, belief system, that you can only quote source material and anything else is, sacrilegious, if you will. I mean, without using that word, they would suggest it other ways. But yeah, I've run into that in several occasions, and I just kind of have to say, hey, that's unfortunate that there's no flexibility for you in this system like there is for me. But I'm gonna keep allowing there to be flexibility so I can improve the quality of my consciousness. If you want to keep yours where it is, that's fine.
yeah, no, it's even encouraging to hear that you say that. It reminds me that the voices of those few are being drowned out by more that are questioning it. But it's a good thing.
Yeah, and I don't even look at it as questioning it. I was just looking at it as broadening the understanding, right? If everything is sort of a fractalization of the one true creator, then like you can always continue to go deeper. There's never an end to how complex and how beautiful and how unique something is. And to stay stuck in like you're going to get swallowed up by the wave of mutation and the wave of change. And that's their own lesson to learn. It's not, I don't have to have that be my lesson. So I've sort of gravitated toward the people that are allowing it to be what it is for them and for me, and it doesn't always have to match up, and that's fine, and I can learn something from them and they can learn something from me. But I think that core aspect of it being not a belief but just an experiment, something I can learn through experience with, is the most important part. If it was anything other than that, I've gone through all the other religions. I don't need another cult. Like, this isn't it, so
Yeah.
I'm glad it is what it is for me, and I just have well wishes towards those who are maybe not allowing it to evolve with them.
Hmm. Well, I definitely heard Ra on several audio recordings. Someone would say like, "With your system," and he'd always like snap right back. It's not my system. Like, you know what I mean? Like he wasn't trying to have disciples or followers.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he seemed irritated by most people. So he was like, so he was the right vessel to get that information out. And it really is, I think, all those people, and I think I found myself doing it too, like out of gratitude for putting his life and body on the line to get that state of consciousness at that time out. It killed him, right? Like it wore him out.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, man. So it's almost like there's a you want to be grateful, you want to remember the man for what he did, but then you get locked into, is that make him, Jesus or something, right? Like it's not, and he didn't want that. And I mean, he did
Right.
talk about how it should be mutated, which is interesting because I thought the story went like with Richard Rudd, he wanted to go do Gene Keys. I've heard it described as Richard Rudd was kicked out, but from what I have also heard, no, it wasn't. It was just like Ross said, well, if you're going to go do that, you need to do it by yourself, and that would make sense because otherwise, you know what I mean? Like it was
Yeah.
all like I don't know that exchange was ever recorded, and Richard Rudd's alive, so I wonder if he's actually shared like what that actual conversation was. He probably has actually.
I've listened to several interviews of him describe it, but I've never heard him say, give any verbatims or any quotes or anything like that. And I have a sense that he probably wouldn't, because he knows that it's hard to recreate the energetic feel for a conversation just by reciting the words.
Yeah.
And so where I think he's done a very diplomatic job is just expressing the gratitude for the system in terms of what it was. His background, like where he really dove in and tried to expand upon the work, was through the I Ching at first, right? I mean, he went and like followed a living transmission, like a person that, like a guru, like a person that's like all they are is like passing information from the other side. Like they're not even a human, they're just a non-person.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that time in his life was really what allowed him to wake up to the idea that that the system is what it was, not a thing, it was a living transmission, and it continues to be, and that transmission is going to continue to grow, and there will continue to be insights and downloads and information that come from it that didn't come from the original source. Like that's the beautiful part of it, is that like it may grow in a unique and different way that isn't from Ra himself. And I think that's perfect. Like that is just fine, that things change. And none of what I've seen so far has been like counter to anything else that I've ever heard. Like, any of these works, I think they're all looking at the same thing from different sides of the big glass sphere that we're sort of looking into. And one is not different than the other. They're just looking at it through a different bend in the light that comes from where they're at. That's really all it is. There doesn't have to be any judgment of one system versus another, as long as they all sort of point to the truth that love is the most important aspect of our evolution as a species and as a spirit and as anything else you can think of after that.
Yeah. Yeah. Love is a repeatable thing in it throughout, right?
Yeah,
Like,
doesn't
so
matter where you go. That's the one.
yeah, all you need is love. Like immediately thinking of
It's so
love.
cliche, man. It's so cliche, but like, I swear
Mhm.
to God, in my ayahuasca ceremony, that was my awakening, right? That was
Mhm.
the bagel was cool to look at, but like the awakening that like let me understand, like, no, like, you are not you. You are much bigger than you.
Yeah.
So is everyone, and you are all bigger than, like, that was the overwhelming blanket of love, that just like ocean of love that I was swimming in for like 5 straight hours. I was like, okay, like it's cliche, but like it's so true. All you need is love. Love is like the only thing that you have to think about. Like that is it. Like just love. If you just
Mhm.
do that, and you don't have to, you don't even have you don't need a system. You just love.
Mhm.
You will probably start working through the self and not self very easily, because if you love something, then you're gonna treat it with the utmost respect, and you're gonna treat yourself with the utmost respect. And if you love yourself, then you're gonna embody who you are. What vehicle you're in is going to express itself just as it's supposed to.
Mhm. Yeah. So many things. But as you were saying that, I was thinking, I was listening to Jenna Zoe's podcast last week, and I mean, there's another one where she's kind of created her own mutation and gets a lot of critique for calling them gifts and all these
Right.
things. But she said something last week or 2 weeks ago about if you go through life wearing rose-colored glasses, red flags just look like flags, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
even just the rose, like the red color, like if you just kind of look at everything with love, all of a sudden these fears and things, they're not so scary, and then you ripple out with that vibe, and it infects those around you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty cool. Did Richard Rudd, like I haven't read the Gene Keys. I've definitely done my own report. I'm curious about it. I see a lot of value in it, but being this quad left MG, I don't know if I'll ever finish it cover to cover. So, like it's
A
just
lot.
not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, but did he talk about 2027 in, or it's not even part of the agenda? Oh, he did? Okay. What
Oh
was the
yeah,
message there?
it's actually in the 55th gene key. It's a part of that one and the 22nd gene key are where it was almost fully explored, like in a way that I haven't, maybe I just haven't listened to enough of the raw talks to get a sense for it. But it was very clear, very specific. It talked, in the 22nd, it talked about the different eons of humanity's existence. And we've gone through three, we're in the third one, and now we're into the third part of that third one. Now we're breaking that third one down into the thirds of 87 to 12 to, so it's breaking itself up into this next level. So basically, where we're moving from the bottom three stacks of the I Ching, we're going to the fourth one, and
Hmm.
that there's six of them. Like, and we're gonna all evolve. The Earth has already started evolving itself into that fourth level, and like humanity's collective consciousness is going to be moving through that. It's a very dense aspect of the book itself, because it's, if you just read the gene keys by themselves, they're each kind of like 2 or 3 pages or whatever. 55's like, it's like 50 pages or something. It's mostly about the 2027, and how freedom, specifically the freedom we will all be experiencing from the oppression of separateness and self, the freedom we're going to experience as we mutate and evolve into that next level of humanity is really well put, and I think is really beautifully done, the way he described it through that gene key specifically.
Wow. Okay. I remember where I was. I was on a train in England, thinking about whether I would reach out to Richard Beaumont because I knew he was only a few hours away, listening to Richard Rudd talk about the 55th gene key. Like he did this transmission. I remember being on the train with my headphones in, listening to it, and being like, "Holy shit!" Because he talked about it was like it was the setting was suitable. He's in this cabin. It's raining outside, and his voice changed, and like I felt the message, but the whole
Mhm.
time I was like, I gotta reach out and see if this Richard Beaumont guy will talk to me, and I never did. I chickened out, but and I hooked up with him like 8 months later. No, 3 months later. Um, but that 55th gene key, I remember him talking about maybe it was him or it was this other fellow as well, but it was like this journey of a butterfly, and and you start, you're kind of dense, and then you're letting in more light, and eventually, you're when you're done, you're flying. You don't need food. You're using the sun for your nutrition,
Right.
and
Yep.
I've been embodying that for the last year, not necessarily even on purpose, but it has been what I've been doing. I keep doing my somatic trauma work,
Hmm.
like getting rid of more salt density, so like removing connections with people that are dense, removing foods that are dense. Like I can't eat four or five French fries anymore. Like it
Hmm.
makes me physically sick. Now, part of that's my calm digestion, and like I wouldn't eat French fries by myself, and that's where
Mhm.
they kind of I need to eat by myself or at least eat in a non stressful environment. So it's hard.
Mhm.
I'm not going to go buy French fries and then sit in the corner because now I'm just going to be like feeling guilty for eating French fries by myself.
Right.
So it's kind of happening naturally, but it's weird. It feels like my body is morphing as part of this process. And the reason I was curious is I had that 55th gate, and I'll be 55 in 2027, and like my brain was like starting
Oh
to pick
yeah.
up the gun. So, and that's a fair amount of arrogance at that point. Like, but I recognize my body and vehicle, along with a lot of ours, is somehow a little part of this, right? Like some.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. Even if you don't have the 55th gate or whatever, it's the gene keys makes it clear that it's all of them are active within the 64 different codon rings of our genetic, and I mean that's where I like, as I've been sort of reading through all these other works that have been done. I haven't gone back and done the reading of the I Ching like I probably should, but I've been working my way backward, and the law of one is like probably the one that's the most interesting as it relates to human design, because it talks about all of these things in terms of density, right? It talks about how you will become more and more light and less sort of matter, and that transformation, um, it has a real physical impact, and it's all done through your genetics, like through your individual expression of yourself through your genes, because your whole body, the body vessel, is organized by genes. Like that's it. Like there's nothing else. Like
Mhm.
everything is genes. Like each cell in your body that is yours, like it's not just a bacteria that's living with you, but that is yours. It's just going based on the programming that it has, and you can change that programming with the spirit that has entered your body and manifested as a soul. That is like what your job is. Your job here is to continue to evolve the body into something that allows you to be more spirit, and the body reaches up, the spirit reaches down, and that merging is the center point of the sort of toroidal field that we generate. And our auras all look a little bit different, but that's what that is. It's the spirit meeting the body and creating the soul at the 0 point of our conscious experience.
Yes, all
That
those
that's
things.
my thought. That's how I've interpreted it anyway. It's not like it's a belief system, but that's just how I've interpreted it.
No, but that is it's what I've been doing in my experiments without having a compass of knowing why I was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Like basically chasing Kundalini experiences and having many. Like I can almost it's almost I've almost got it down to a science where when it happens, I'm like, okay, I just made that happen, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it did all the work to get there. Like
Right.
we're a satellite dish, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
get that, and like you described, you're yeah, very interesting. And then Dewan Cornish was talking at that HD summit, and he was talking about trees and how they reach up to the sky, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they're doing for us is like basically, you know, uh, they're themselves maybe these satellite receivers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when he was talking about it, I remember thinking like Jack and the Beanstalk and how you get this one tree that, or you throw these magic beans, it goes up in the thing, and all of a sudden something's coming down, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
created that connection. So there's something to all that, even that storytelling.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
if it was
As above, so below. Like that's literally everywhere for me now. Like I see it in all things. It's a I don't. Like, it used to kind of just be funny, like, oh, like, yeah, as above, so below. Like, but now I'm like, yeah, we're probably just like each our own cell, and the body is the planet, and the planet itself is its own thing, and it's a cell within the like it's like it's all that maybe I get too far out there sometimes with whenever we talk about the sort of realm of metaphysical or spirituality, but it helps me stay grounded in my real life, which is what I think is the most important aspect of it, because we're not here to just float up into space. We're here to meet ourselves at the body too, and we're here to meet ourselves in the body in a lived experience where we express love, and we enjoy the people around us, and we you know make mistakes, and we learn from them, and we grow, and we cry and we laugh, and we do all that stuff of being a human. And that's the point, like not the ascending to heaven or the you know just filling the vessel. It's a little bit of both. And I for me, human design and the gene keys and all this has been a really practical way for me to understand myself in both a spirit term and in a body term.
Hmm. Okay, so what goes around comes around. Again, sorry, my shark brain. I heard all of that and agree with all that, but where you sent me was the what goes around comes around, or as above, so below. What made me think of what goes around comes around, and that's the infinity symbol, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then my brain was like, okay, so every time I see the infinity symbol, it's this way. It's not like an eight, right? And so mammals, and when we sleep, we're
Mm-hmm.
mammals. When
Mm-hmm.
we're awake, we go this way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what goes around comes around. It's what we put out is what we get back, and that's ultimately karmic as well, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
very, very interesting. Like if you just took that infinity symbol and flipped it, and and actually, isn't that a DNA strand then? Like if you were to imagine it going up your spine, a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
those.
Yeah, and the infinity symbol is just a slice of the torus too for your.
It's interesting because it's on the magician's tarot card. There's an infinity symbol above the person's head.
Which one is that? The second one? First one.
I think it's the first card, yeah.
The zero
But
is the fool. The first one's the magician.
I think it's number. I think it's card. I think it's the number one.
Okay.
But the card magician, but it has the infinity symbol on it above the magician's head, at least in the Rider Waite deck.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just attended a tarot course, and it was really good. Like just getting some of the history around that.
Mm-hmm.
But like that magician card, I remember that all the four elements were like on the table. Like there's a
Mm-hmm.
table, and it's pentacles and swords, and and it's water, air, earth, fire, but
Mm-hmm.
they're all on the table. Like so to me, it's like all the all the things are on the table.
Mm-hmm.
What goes around comes around. The magician is I don't know what are your tricks or I don't know. Very interesting. But I pulled that card several times in the last week too. So there's something there that I think I need to explore. But
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, it's cool, man. Okay, where do we go from here?
That is a good question.
The So Richard Rudd does talk about that in the Gene Keys. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And you asked earlier something to the effect of, hasn't what Ra's been predicting coming true?
Well, I just wonder, is there anything he's predicted that really hasn't come true? And that, I don't know if there was. Again, I haven't gone through all his material, so I don't know what all sort of definitive statements he's ever made. But yeah, I was wondering if there's anything where they had to go back and, well, we think, someone said that like originally there wasn't a certain type, and then they added a type, and then they added they've kind of added some things to clarify, like maybe not contradicting anything they've said before, but they've definitely you know added on to the original sort of download. If that am I right in that?
Well, I mean, I certainly heard that he wishes that he had shared things differently over time, right? Like exalted and detriment. He
Mm-hmm.
said that he wishes he did this or that because it
Mm-hmm.
became too much like good or bad
Mm-hmm.
versus just the opposite side of something, the reflection
Mm-hmm.
of it, right? What goes
Yeah.
around comes
Mm-hmm.
around. And then apparently, didn't he like he got so freaked out he burned everything that he recorded, so now he has to recall it from memory.
No, one what I heard that yeah he burned everything except for one remaining thing that he had given to someone else, and they
Mm.
it was that was where he had to recreate everything from. But yeah, everything the original download got completely burned, and he had one thing that he had to recreate from. So
Yeah.
I wonder how much was lost in that original transmission that wasn't in that one page that he kept.
Yeah, well, like 8 days of transmission, that's a lot of content. And like, I feel like I get downloads and it's fast and furious. So like 8 days of that would be intense.
Yeah.
Um, it does make me, it reminds me of, so again, the hypnosis, the subconscious. Like I can't let go that this voice wasn't just his own, right? Or how he heard it, right?
Mm.
Um, and I've heard that described a lot. Like if your spirit guides are talking to you, sometimes it's a whisper, and it'll come to you as though like it's your own voice, or sounds familiar enough, right? And then are you deciding that, oh, that's grandma or that's whatever, or is it that's what grandma would say, and
Yeah.
you're retrieving that nugget of value that you
Right.
knew that respected person in your
Like
life.
like your brain has a voice filtration system that takes whatever the download is and
Mhm.
spits it out in a sound that is most appeasing to the body.
Yeah.
Because the if you've followed any of the other people that are transmitters, or people that have channeled, especially like the three people that did the raw contact, the raw contact, like the one that the law of one is written based on. The voice was very clearly coming from her. She was in a non-conscious state every time they would do a channeling, and the voice would come through as sounding very different than the body of the person. They call her the instrument.
Mhm.
um, this instrument, and they would say like turn the candle 10 degrees. Like they would give instructions to the people around her to help clear the transmission so they could speak as clearly as possible using the words that they knew that she had in her brain that they could answer the questions with, because it was all Q&A, which I thought was pretty fascinating. It wasn't we're going to make you sweat from your scalp and you got to like write everything down that you possibly can, because it's going to be a lot. like Ra Uru Hu did.
Yeah. Well, and as you say that, you make me think of Bashar,
Oh,
Abraham.
right. Yeah.
Um, they're it's a different voice being channeled, and then light language. Like light language is definitely something that's I'm seeing everywhere lately on YouTube and people channeling, and there's something to that. I'm talking
Yeah.
to my friend. She said it sounds like what she would imagine Sanskrit would sound like, right? The oldest
Mm.
recorded language, and I haven't read it again, probably won't, but when she was like, yeah, basically in it, it says like use these plants to heal yourself, and it's like literally written there as some of the oldest discovered pieces of work, and we continue to ignore it basically. Or
Yeah. I have like maybe it's just my like my experience within the sort of far right Christian church that I had growing up that like gives me a little bit of unease, because I remember like all these people would like say they were speaking in tongues, and they would like say it almost sounded like some of the light language stuff that you shared with me the other day. I'm like, oh man, that makes my heartburn, like like, oh man, I'm getting flashbacks from a holy roller solid rock Christian church where people are
Mhm.
got streamers and bubbles and they're speaking crazy language, and then they're sleeping with each other's wives, and I was like,
Yeah.
but I'm not saying it's not real. I just think I wonder how much of that sort of um that aspect of spirituality got like taken in and either corrupted or misrepresented or whatever through that. And again, not saying that Christianity by itself is a negative thing. I'm just saying for places I was in, very clearly these people were just putting on a show, and it was just for raising money and living a lavish lifestyle, not for the work of like helping and serving and doing for others. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, it's all been fucked up over time, right? And all comes down to money and control and power.
Right.
So, and that's what's leaving us, right? With
Yeah.
2027. So the grip on all of us is falling apart everywhere. I mean, I find it every time. Get this. I spent 3.5 hours on the phone last week with the Canadian Revenue Agency. So to, I had to prove to them that I owned a business that I've owned for 18 years. But
Mm-hmm.
it didn't have me on record still, despite paying them taxes every year and filing and stuff. I still had to spend 3 hours of my time to prove to them that I owned my own business.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane. That all of a sudden I was like, I probably could have just kept all the money, right? Because they didn't know, they weren't even tracking on me, and there's less people there. Like it took forever to get a human to call me back,
Mm-hmm.
and this poor lady on the phone was like, "I'm so sorry, this system is completely antiquated." Like, and I'm sure the call's being recorded, but she was just like, she was as frustrated as we were. Like, why do I have to do all this work to
Mm-hmm.
prove to you that I want to pay you taxes for roads
Right.
that
Yeah.
you're
I
not,
don't want to pay taxes. We don't have to go down this road if you don't want to.
yeah, you're not doing shit lately. You're just basically taking out all my energy. Fuck off.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that was just such a reminder that like there is nobody left to answer the phone there. They're really down to hiding behind a bunch of old policies, and that's crazy. So
Yeah.
2027, you can see that coming. So whether that's a prophecy, I definitely believe it's, it's things are mutating towards that direction because it kind of needs to happen.
Yeah.
It's religion and government has reached the end of their usefulness.
So
And with,
what's based on the predictions or sort of the things that have been said from, Ra or others, what are how do you feel in that, if you've contemplated it, how do you feel things are going to start to transpire then?
I've said this a few times now. I think YouTube, like to actually just name a platform,
Mm-hmm.
is super valuable right now. TikTok is consuming people's short attention span, but on YouTube there are people sharing their experiences in a longer length format, and
Mm-hmm.
people can like it. I like that they don't show how many dislikes things have anymore
Yeah.
because, right? I didn't like that at first. It didn't make sense to me, but it does now because and if they're doing a good job of handling bots and stuff, basically someone is sharing something, and if a million people have liked it and are commenting, and the comments aren't bullshit and tons of comments in them, you can tell are bots. So you have to trust your intuition of what you're seeing, but we're getting information that we never used to get before at a speed that's faster and faster.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got YouTube Shorts cutting it up into those little sound bites that the parlor tricks to grab you and be like, oh, I want to learn more about this from this person.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like that vehicle is feeding our collective knowledge or consciousness very quickly, and it seems to be one of the better places. That's where I spend my time. Maybe it's I'm 51 and being on TikTok just makes me agitated. So, but that's my filter coming through too, right? But
Mm-hmm.
to me, the speed that we're learning and the knowledge that we're synthesizing is getting faster and faster and faster. And
Yeah.
it's pretty clear that like I'm a big follower of Nikola Tesla. Very fascinated about that, and of course, then Tesla, the company, and Elon, and like this. I mean, there's so many things there.
Yeah.
But understanding with Nikola Tesla, like he had found a way to create enough power you could hold in your hand that could power a city.
Mm-hmm.
So we had this ability to create the energy we need to do anything we want individually.
Mm-hmm.
And so why would we need a distributed electrical system? So it's
Right.
funny, I didn't wear this on purpose today, but I did, it's my ACDC shirt with Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison. And lately I'm just like, fuck you, Thomas Edison. Like that guy basically wanted to distribute power because there was money in it and there was
Right.
control. And my understanding is he was paying children 25 cents back in the 30s or whatever. And back then, 25 cents would be what, $15 today, paying
Mm-hmm.
like street kids to go round up dogs, and he was electrocuting them with AC power,
Hmm.
like or I can't remember. Anyways, he was electrocuting with this uncontrollable, unsafe power
Mm-hmm.
to dissuade people from wanting to use it and explore it. Well, even his electrical stuff back then, probably if you touched it wrong, you'd lose your head as well, right? That's what we've done over time is create all these standards to make it safe,
Mm-hmm.
distribute it. Surely someone would have packaged it up into a little box that was contained and you could run your business from your home. You didn't know what, you could grow your own vegetables and all these things where you'd need power and you wouldn't be dependent on your power company. And I think because it's pretty clear that this has been possible, and over the years, more people have been exploring it, finding it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen The Lost Century? Dr. Stephen Greer's. It's awesome. It's on the.
On YouTube.
It's I don't know if it's on Netflix or whatever, but he's a. My understanding is he's like a emergency hospital surgeon. He's got
Mm-hmm.
this deep interest in aliens and Area 51 and the secrets that are being kept by the government is really what
Mm-hmm.
he's trying to expose. And in it, he talks about all these people that approached him that proved that they could generate power in their house by
Yeah.
themselves. And they each one were kind of like Gollum. Like they were like, my precious, like I can't give this information out because I need to feed my family. I need to pay all our debts off.
Mm-hmm.
And so but each one of them ends up being dead. Like he basically is reflecting on all these stories one after another that are sad
Mm-hmm.
because people held on to the secret but didn't know how to market it, didn't know how, and ultimately was still like holding it
Yeah.
instead of sharing the information.
Hmm.
And so that documentary is very interesting. I thought it was pretty cool.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think I have a friend here who used to work for the local hydro company because it got privatized. It used to be like provincially government controlled, I think, and then
Mhm.
eventually got privatized. He said like some of the areas where they like some of the dams that
Mhm.
are being used to generate this power haven't been touched or upgraded or fixed since like the 70s.
It
So
doesn't
like
surprise me.
the collapse,
Hmm.
or like my house, we have a house that's 2 years old. They still put electrical poles out front instead of digging a trench and going underground. Like they're not improving the infrastructure. They're just charging money, not even taking a moment when that was the time to dig a trench. Like
Hmm.
they're just not doing what they're here to do, which is provide us with reliable power. They're dropping the ball
I
over
mean,
and
they're a part of the collective consciousness of the people that are there, though, right? I mean, the accountability comes from the citizens there, right? So is it them or is it the citizens?
it's both, man. Okay, thank you for asking that. Because here's another. So I know someone that worked for them. I think he's retired now. And I remember one night the power went out, and he was off duty that night, but he worked for the power company.
Hmm.
And as he drove by a tree, he was like, "Oh, I can see exactly where it happened." Like he knew where the power was lost.
Hmm.
And I said, "Are you going to call and tell someone?" He's like, "Oh no, that's not my job. They'll figure it out eventually." And I thought,
Hmm.
you motherfucker, there'll be some people that are in their homes on like life support systems that don't have
Yeah.
power, and he's instead saying, "Oh, they'll figure it out. Not my job." Like, it
Hmm.
is your fucking job, even when you're off duty, to at least just call and say, "You know what? I drove by Main Street.
Yeah.
Where the power outage is this tree." Instead, he was going to let them do their call out duty, eventually get there. Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you've got collective incompetence from the company, but their own
Right.
people saying, "I'm not paid enough to give a shit." Like,
Right.
just complacency everywhere.
Yeah.
Makes me
So,
crazy.
what I find fascinating about that is just how little effort it actually takes to make systemic changes. And are you familiar with the 3.5% rule?
No, it's interesting. It's 3-5 though.
Yeah, it is. It's 3.5%, and they've studied this through various cultures, various countries, various sizes of, whether it's a city, a state, a province, a country, an area. But if 3.5% of any given unit of measurements population actually physically shows up somewhere to protest something, that's the magic number. It will change after that.
It only takes 3.5%.
Hmm.
So that's education. That's giving them a reason to go. It's marketing.
Yeah, but it takes whatever that threshold is to get them over the, from, innovator to early adopter to, like, the masses, like that one little gap there that you've got to bridge
Mhm.
is it. So if there are people out there that feel passionately about something, that's really the number they need to be thinking about. If it has to do with like a systemic thing, not a like I want a thing that only applies to these certain groups of people. I mean, if this is like hey, this is for all of us, like we all need to care about this. That's the threshold that is needed for the rest of the population to, or the ones that are at least in control of the system to start changing it for the rest of the population.
Well, I wonder if Ra rounded up then. The whole 4% of 4% thing. Did he just round up because it's easier to say?
Maybe I don't know.
So the 4% of the 4%. The first 4% of 4% is a lot of us that are in like digging in deep to human design. The
Right.
next wave comes out more beautifully, just like Gene Keys, right? It's just softer. It's more like, oh, this resonates. I don't feel like,
I don't. I'm not getting abused.
yeah. Um, and so is there and there are other mutations that are coming from that, right? Like Sphinx
Mhm.
code, which honestly, I besides listening to a podcast about it and dipping my toe in it, was like I'm not ready for more distractions. But
Right.
there's something fascinating about it. Like the guy's name is Magnus, or they had their own download, and it was because they were aware of human design and gene keys and been like 10 years into it, so had got lots of depth out of it.
Yeah.
and then kind of mixed it with tarot to show you like shadows. And the whole idea is that you, like, my memory of it is like, the idea is that we're all kind of characters to other people. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think the example used was something like a mother and a daughter looked at the cards, and the daughter saw the mother as an evil witch,
Mm-hmm.
and the daughter saw the mother as something else. And then when they talked about it, they're like, "That's exactly how I see you." Like
Mm-hmm.
the cards told them the villain that they saw
Mm-hmm.
as a visual. So yeah, there's something to that.
It's fascinating.
Hmm. Pause for effect.
Yeah, and I think that sort of speaks to one of those things we were talking about before we started this podcast. About what's our responsibility to the system and what's not our responsibility to the system. Like I think a lot of us, there's a lot of people that I've known that have looked at it and been like, that sounds like work. Like, no, thank you. Um,
Yeah.
and so maybe it's just not. It's just they're looking at the card and thinking, I'm going to look at this and it's just going to have a very different interpretation than it
Mhm.
will for you, and that's fine, right? How can we accept that there is a that the human design is maybe not meant to be like the only way to look at your lived existence
Mhm.
as a conscious being on this planet. Like what room does it make for others? Because in my experience, and I, because I like this and I resonate with this, like it shows me my work. It says, okay, here's what you got to work on. Okay,
Mhm.
great. Like I can do that. Like that resonates for me. But for other people, it's like that doesn't hit with me. I'd rather go look at this. And even if that other system or philosophy or belief or whatever is kind of doing the same thing, saying this is your work, it's not. It's just it lands for them in a way that it doesn't for this wouldn't. So is there anything that Ra talked about with regards to how this is or isn't meant to be for everyone?
What I heard was the 4% or 4%. Like that's how many people will be ready to receive it or can receive it. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what I heard from it. I, but
But
again, like,
does that mean that it'll never be more than 4%?
well, see, that's the part that I want to challenge, right? Like, because he said it, do we believe it, and therefore we're not communicating it? Like, we're like, oh, this isn't probably gonna be for you, right? Like, where's your spells? If you're like, because I see a lot of and I feel it, exasperation. Like, when I talk to people, I get so excited about it, and I've alienated myself from a lot of people because I'm just like, look, there's something to this. I care about you. I want you to see this,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want it. I mean, I guess I want it for me. I want them to be okay. I want them to live
Yeah.
longer. I want them to join me. I'm planning to live till 300, and I'm
Yeah.
working on figuring out fucking how. Like that's my goal. And I want to take people with me. I don't want to suffer and watch them all. You know what I mean?
So let me follow up on that then. How have you been positioning it?
Oh, before poorly, in their face, uninvited. It's so like my tactics have changed a lot, and I think
Mm-hmm.
it has been through 3-5 experiential way, um, becoming very strategic. I
Mm-hmm.
wait, I listen, and then it's parlor tricks. Like it'll because my gate 57, I've got this very acute ear. I
Mm-hmm.
can hear a tremble in someone's voice lately, and it's
Yeah.
getting more and more pronounced and amplified. I think plant medicine, like all the healing that I'm doing, it's becoming very very acute. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'll be like, I heard your voice waver on this one word, or and I'll be because I learned also from Nathan, like I've got these and Leanne. About these projected channels.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I can project to people, but it needs to be invited from me. But I've
Mm-hmm.
become sneaky about how I get invited. Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I'm observing something. Can I share it with you? And if they
Yeah.
say I'm in, right? It's just like
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
and I can feel it. It's almost like the moment changes, and like I can feel like like looking through a paper towel tube. Like here we are. I can see you there, and we're
Mm-hmm.
they can hear me, right? And then I'm like, oh fuck, I better not fuck this up. So then I'll pause and think about, or try not to think of, yeah, I don't want to think about what I'm going to say.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, see, that's interesting too. I do find myself trying to deliver the information without interference.
So, all right, then I know nothing about human design. You know, but I said something that prompted your what did I say that prompted your first thing? Like, what was there? Are you have any examples of where you found a way to sort of like
The
discuss it?
most recent example is a fellow that's already into human design and hypnosis,
Mm,
and he's a pharmacist. Like, fascinating conversation. Because but I know, and I think I think he has an undefined throat. And so I was looking at his body graph, we're talking,
mm,
and what he said, it was just a quiver in his voice for a second, but my ear was just like just latched onto it. So I
mm-hmm,
let him finish, and then I just did hey, I observed that your voice quivered when you said this, and I can't remember what it was. My memory was like, he's a pharmacist. People
mm-hmm,
come to him to get medicine that they're paying for, that the governments and corporations are profiting from. But
mm-hmm,
he knows through hypnosis, he can help these people in 30 seconds,
mm-hmm,
like through NLP and behavioral, like he can do this. And I think in that moment, and all I did is ask a question, which is something I'm getting good at too. I ask a question, I plant the seed of discovery in him versus telling him what I think he wants to do next, which is, he can't do his best work as a pharmacist. He can meet
mm-hmm,
people,
mm,
and he potentially, they're gonna buy less drugs from him if he gives them the answer to the dis-ease they feel in their body, right?
mm-hmm. Yep.
So I almost sense that he's probably on the precipice of being like, how do you navigate that? You got your day job, you got your family relying on you having that day job.
Yeah.
You got this group of people that come in all the time buying more meds to, instead of like digging into the metaphysical or the
Mm-hmm,
unconscious of why they've got some of these ailments. They're just buying more drugs that have
mm-hmm.
more uh, after effects. What is it? Side effects,
Yeah.
right? And so,
It's
yeah.
interesting. It's there's a lot that you said there that I want to ask about. I think first I'll just hit on my thoughts on the medicine part, and then I'll share some ideas about like how I position this as a philosophy or as a way of thinking or whatever, and then get your feedback on it. But yeah, the medicine part of it, I don't view medicine as good or bad or evil or anything. I just is a thing, and it is for some people the way that they're coping with something that they're dealing with internally, right? And it is never my job to tell someone how they should cope, right? We all cope in our own way, and whatever works works. But I do know what I do believe is that the coping is uh, it's just going to be your waiting period until you get to the point where you can receive the information or the the way of thinking that you need to be able to say, oh, you know what, actually, I don't need this coping mechanism anymore, right? And it's not just medicine. There's lots of coping mechanisms we have. Medicine is just one form that it
Mhm.
that it sort of can be seen very easily. And so I try not to lump it all into one thing. I just sort of view it as all as like, hey, these are ways in which we manage living a life where we haven't really discovered what self versus not self means for us, and they all look the same to me. I don't even think of them as like one way or another. And so I think that's helped me just sort of be a little bit more, have a little bit more equanimity to it. Just like, look, I cope. I have my own ways I cope. They're going to be different than yours. It may be a different frequency or vibrational match than what you are, and that's fine. But if it's something that is like you could tell it's just weighing on that person like a lot, then it becomes easier to open up. Like, hey, like tell me, like, what are your, and especially if I can get a read on what their type is, like, what are your frustrations about that, or what are your, does that ever cause you like a bit of resentment or bitterness? Like you just kind of get a sense for where because they'll almost always they'll cue in on one of those words to say
Mhm.
like, oh yeah, like makes me incredibly bitter that I'm doing this. Like, oh, now I know this might be a projector. It's not firm, but um, there's usually one or two words that'll help. But more often than not, because I'm wanting to react or respond to things, I give other people things to respond to. So this is like one of them, right? I put this on the back of my phone. It's my pop socket.
Mm-hmm.
People can see it. What's that? Oh, it's Meyers Briggs for your heart.
Oh, I like that.
Like
Yeah, because Myers Briggs is something they've heard of, and they're like, "Oh, that's interesting."
yeah, it's a personality test for your spirit.
I
Like,
made a, I put my body graph on a hoodie, but I've
oh, you
only
did?
worn it once, and partly I
Oh,
didn't. Yeah, because I'm touch, I didn't actually like the fabric of the hoodie because I
mm,
ordered it online. So I
yeah.
think that's, I think that it's funny, but I think that was my excuse to myself is I'm not ready to wear my body graph out to be judged, except I share it with anyone that'll listen because I'm curious to hear what they. But I think now that I just thinking about that out loud, I bought the shirt online and I don't like the feel of it on me, so I can't wear it.
It's your spleen telling
Yeah,
you, yeah.
because I think you're right. Like wearing it right on your shirt and having people go like, what is that? Right?
Hmm.
Like, so it's kind of inviting them in to ask.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's fascinating, man. Yeah, okay. So yeah, I remember when you were talking about that pop socket, and I didn't. You know what I thought? I thought you had a bunch of them and you were giving them out like people give out swag. So that was
No, it's
just
just
your
mine.
pop socket. So
Yeah.
because like, why are you giving out pop sockets of like a
No,
random?
no, it's just
I
mine.
didn't even recognize it was yours. That's
Yeah,
funny.
yeah, yeah. So like this is the personality test for my spirit or my heart or whatever. Like whatever makes sense. But I definitely, don't say like, well, listen, a long time ago, this man had a voice.
Yeah, and a blue light, and he watched
and
for 8 days,
and
and
if you look closely, somewhere in the universe, there's an umbilical cord floating. Okay. That's what led to this.
yeah, I it's funny, but like I find myself being strategic and don't even realize I'm doing it until later. But I was talking to our friend Nathan, and I was talking about how it seems to be my 3-5 profile and how I just outstay my welcome, right? Like I got a bonds made and broken. I need to just kind of mic drop sometimes. So even with this, like there's a bunch of human design Facebook groups, and there's all sorts of people. Like and I don't know if you're finding, but it seems like more and more people are taking notice, right? There's a popularity to this rising. I can see it. So people are like, oh, this is my photograph. I don't really understand. I have a problem with my daughter, and
Yeah.
there's two camps that respond to that. There's the ones that are like, I'm a professional reader. Here's my link. Be careful who you listen to out there, which is just entirely fucking sales pitch at that point. Like, come listen to me. I know what's best for you.
Right.
And so they're the ones that are actually throwing shade on everybody else, but they're the
Hmm.
ones that actually might be the problem.
Hmm.
And so for a while, I'd respond. I would just say, oh, gate 21, you're probably good at selling concepts and this and like, and I go right for like really really parlor tricky, like really like how the heck would that person know that, right? But I've
Mm.
realized I was for a while I was doing quite a bit, like I give them like 20. Now I just dropped 2, right? Like just enough to be mysterious, and that's what he said to me is that's kind of my role in design too is drop in, boop, and then get out, and then
Mm.
leave them always wanting a little more. And it's funny, I've
Mm.
been kind of taking that tact in life, even like go play with my softball team, and I'll just leave early, just be like, because there is a point with me and my design and my experience that I overstay my welcome somehow, and
Mm.
it's been very interesting just applying those tactics and how much better it serves me. It's very very interesting. I just went all over the place on that, but back to your question, just like how do I share? Now it's like poop, and then maybe that's like a shark too, right? Just sneak
Yeah.
from behind, take out a leg, and then disappear and leave them with, I don't have a leg anymore. What just happened, right? Like that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
that'll wake you up. All of a sudden you're like racing fish,
Yeah.
right?
That's funny. Yeah. That, I mean, because, we're both manifesting generators. We both got the 3420. We often like get into something and then, at least for me, as soon as I take something in, the next way I learn it is by sharing it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I give it to someone else. I'm like, look at this thing, and then I can learn by telling you about it, right? Um, the but with something like this, it's like I got to be a little bit more careful because it's not something that you can kind of approach with like a hammer, like, hey, look at this thing that I just found. It's so awesome, and like, let me beat you over the head with it. Like I can with things that are less, they don't have the depth of like existential issues that this creates in people. So I've tried to find ways to make it, not become an evangelist, but just become like, like you said, I went to that Renaissance fair this last weekend, and I was with a bunch of people that generally, I knew they're going to be open. A lot of them do astrology, things like that. But just they all did the same thing. They're like, oh, what's that on your thing? And they're like, oh, well, it's my bodygraph. It's like my personality for my spirit. And they tell me more. But I would only share I'm like, well, this is yours. All I can tell you is that it helps you understand where you may be acting out of a place of like compulsion, where it's not necessarily something you should do or want to do, but you do it anyway because you feel like it's the right thing you should do. And the place where it's like, okay, no, this is me, and this is always the way it is, and like you don't have to even think about it. And just that sort of helping them see that in themselves. I'm not going into gates. I'm not going to do any channels. I'm not doing any variables. I'm not doing any of that. Like that's just too much for people right off the bat. So I'm just like, there's ways that you interact with your energy that are great for you, and ways that you interact with your energy that are more draining. And here's how you can sort of better understand where that comes up in your life.
Yeah, I find if I'm introducing it to someone, I start with their profile and their openness. I don't go to their type or strategy because it doesn't. That actually seems to be too far out there.
Right. Yeah. I don't even say their type. I don't even say who, like, I don't say manifest and generate. I don't give them labels.
Yeah.
Like, because I think labels, then they can fixate on, oh, I'm this. That means I need to know what this, and I'd rather just say like, no, like this is just a thing that shows how energy moves with and through you.
Yeah. Yeah, and those types, those are labels, and I see it in certain types where it's. Am I going to say this? Yeah, I'm going to say it out loud. But my daughter's a manifester, and she's a lovely and the sweetest person in the world. So she's not who I'm referring to. You ever see this? But the other manifestors I met and Ra, like when Ra talks about generators, manifesting generators, I've seen her comment saying like they're the dumbest, they're the easiest to wake up, they're idiots, and it kind of comes from this manifestory, king of the world viewpoint, and the way he comes across, he's like super intelligent. But if you're in, there's social cues, just like don't be an asshole, don't be a dick.
Right.
A lot of manifestors are like, oh, I'm just being a manifester, instead of being like, oh, I could use a little bit of in the moment intelligence and go, oh, maybe if I stopped doing this, I'd have less friction in my life.
Yeah.
I saw that a lot at the Human Design Summit, like manifestors bumping into things and people, and I might as well alienate myself. But
what are you saying? Like, just because you're a manifestor doesn't mean you can't be considerate?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And I described them to Jonah Dempsey via text. It was just like there was all these events there, and nobody showed up on time for anything. But in particular, by the time it got going, 10 minutes after that, a herd of manifestors would come in because they were lumping together, and it was like watching chickens. Like they would just be like bumping into each other, and they like how chickens like get like they're startled. So they're startled by like, why is everybody looking at us and looking kind of frustrated? And it's because literally we're in a circle and some woman is crying. She's sharing a story, and then in come four manifestors, bouncing around and laughing and just not even slightly taking a moment to take in the vibe in the room and go like, oh, maybe I should shut the fuck up and just, I'm already late. But what I kept hearing was, well, I'm a manifester. I'm just manifesting, and no, you're kind of behaving like a dick, like, so yeah. Probably going to alienate myself from a number of people if anyone I know sees this, but
well, I do find it interesting how interactions go with the different various types, through Discord, at least based on what I trust as people's real personalities, right, or their real selves. It's very mental in a Discord, setting, because you're just there's not as much of an aura to react with.
Mhm.
But manifestors are they don't really talk all that much. Um, it's usually the MGs that are in there, like sparking conversations, bringing things up, asking questions, and the projectors are in there usually, ruminating, asking a lot of questions about why and how. And then the reflectors are just sort of like there to, like, kind of weave in between all of that. I just don't see manifestors like really talking all that much. So I would love to have seen an environment like yours where you get to see them sort of playing out in real life. I have a few manifestor friends that I can kind of, get a sense for exactly how manifestory they are, and
Mhm.
they fit a lot of the stereotypes. But I think what they forget is that, like, you're supposed to, like, hold space. You're supposed to protect a void so things can come into it, right? You're supposed to. That's the job. It's not to punch people out. It's to protect a thought or an intention,
Mhm.
and serve that vacuum until it's filled. And once it's filled, let the generators and the other people deal with it.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes they forget that, like, holding that space is like also being a human, and, like, being
Mhm.
considerate of others, and like, yeah. So I don't know. That's just my take, but I could be way off.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess to try to be empathetic to the very thing that I just finished moaning about, like these are folks that have an aura that can. It's been challenging to be a manifester too, right? So,
Yeah. Oh,
so when
trust
I
me.
get
And,
that people,
manifestor women. Oh, I feel so bad for manifestor women. That's like, because they're basically like the exact opposite of what society, at least in the United States, a lot of places has told them they should be. You should be open and inviting and receptive and nice and love, like, all the trajectory things, where they're like, no, like, I gotta like create something, and just that pull between self and not self for them has got to be just brutal.
hmm totally. In fact, some of the coolest women I met are manifestors, and some of them are, but they're quite a number of years into their experiment. I'd say there's still some. I've still observed the like the oh, it's a relief. I can just use this as an excuse for. But I still say like you can still show up at your best
Yeah,
if you care about the people around you and
yeah.
just be a little more, you
It's
know.
it's it's acknowledging that, like, I think what because their life has had such tension in it,
hmm
it's a relief to have someone acknowledge those shadows, right? The lower frequencies of, like, their existence, but
hmm
then to move into the, like, more compassionate and more understanding and more sort of aware of the protector nature that they have for the space that they hold. That takes some real work, and a lot of times they're like, man, I've been working this whole time, I don't need more work, like, so it takes real commitment on their part, where, especially for, I think, the ones that it seems like this is always like, oh yeah, of course, this is exactly how projectors, they see it, they're like, okay, great, now I can finally know how to live, like, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is perfect, I'm going to keep doing it, right?
hmm
Where manifestors, it's, like, no, y'all don't know, this has been tough, like, now I just want to feel a little bit better, like, that someone acknowledges that it's been tough, and
hmm
then maybe I'll deal with, like, being a better person afterward.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that soul recognition too. Like when you
Mhm.
hear something and it's like, oh, that's why I'm fucked up. Right? Like it was a relief to hear the 3-5 profile because it was like,
Well, yeah, I bet.
I keep trying and I
Oh my
can't
gosh.
get it
Yes.
right.
There was a 6'3" that I was talking to this week, and I was like, oh, 6'3", man. I bet it felt really like times before, in your early years, where it just felt hopeless. Sometimes they were like,
hmm Yeah.
yes. Like, I mean, you could see the tears almost welling up in their eyes. They were like, oh my God, yes. Before I turned 30, it was like, you know,
Yeah, that double
rough.
three, right? You
What's
know?
that? That's
The
all
double
three.
three.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like all three.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah. So back to the 4% of 4%. Like I think that's what I'm disappointed by is that was even stated. Like if is it a prophecy or is it that was what Ra thought at the time, and therefore we're all went okay. That's there's a certain acceptance that or not. It's not acceptance because I reject that. I want to reject that and
Well,
suggest
how much of the population globally do you think this is meant for?
all of us.
You think
Honestly,
it's meant for every single person on the planet?
I do, or I hope so. Maybe it's more hope or desire. That's my motivation, right?
Hmm.
Desire. I desire that.
Hmm.
Um,
What aspect of it do you desire most for the global population?
less suffering.
Okay. Do you
Period.
believe that there are other systems that offer less suffering for people?
Are you doing the sacral calibration? I like this. So, ask that question again. So it was an S, a yes, but I've already.
Do you believe there are other systems that will decrease suffering for the global population?
I think that's what these mutations are. Like,
Do you
take.
believe that there are others that exist currently?
Yeah.
Do you believe that this one is better than those
Do I believe that human design is better than those?
for everyone?
No, no.
Then what percentage of the population do you think this is meant for?
Human design.
Yes.
See, that's not a yes or no question. So
I know
there, right
that's
now,
where you have to. That's the reason I ask is because you just said there are others that it might not be better than.
mhm.
So for you to say it's right for the whole globe would mean that this would displace something that could be better for someone else.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's right for. I desire it. So I mean, that's probably natural. That
You
feel.
desire it for everyone,
Mhm.
even if it displaces something that could be better for them.
Oh no, no, I desire less suffering for people. I
Okay,
don't desire that human design is accepted by everyone.
got it. Okay, I thought you meant at first that human design should be the global sort of
No,
structure or system.
no, I think it's a beautiful system that has already mutated many ways, and I think more and more people are hearing about it. And it kind of goes back to my comment about YouTube. Like more and more people are sharing their mutations.
Mm,
I think so long as something reaches someone that switches on their soul and goes like, if I just showed up a little better every day, it'll ripple back to me.
hmm.
What
Yep.
goes around comes around, right? Like
Yeah.
seems so simple.
Making good choices for myself.
Mhm.
Actually, the inner work of doing the good choices for myself is what's going to make things better for everyone. So,
Yeah,
uh,
I'd say one thing that I feel really, really strongly about is self care, and
mhm,
that self care, self love. Because if you love yourself, and I didn't, right? I
mhm,
through many plant medicine experiences and stuff, I've gotten rid of so much salt,
mhm, mhm,
um, and yeah, I just want that feeling for everybody, and it's now replicable. Like I wake up most days recently going like, oh, heck, I just got to bottle this,
mhm,
like.
mhm,
And it's through all sorts of experiments, like even just trying to reverse my dreams rave when I sleep by building a
mhm,
playlist that plays against my shadows and gates, like, and kind of like trying to reprogram, right?
mhm,
I forget who was telling me about that, but it might have been Leanne, but we're basically being programmed while we sleep, and it's generally counter to your design during the day, right? Like I'm a
hmm,
reflector
yeah.
when I sleep, and I'm focused on death and love. Those are and so even in this conversation, like I'm when I sleep, my one of my things, the place I go apparently when I'm a mammal, and the infinity symbol is this way.
Mhm,
I'm focused on death and love.
hmm.
The love part sounds awesome. The death part, I could do with less of that. Um, right? So,
Oh,
but
that's
yeah, yeah, man. Fascinating. So yeah, my desire is to uh, reverse this notion that it's 4% of 4%. I think that's a spell that's being cast, and people are propagating it, and I think that's a shame.
yeah. I'd never heard of that before.
The 4% of 4, it's stated in lots of places. Unless, I mean, I make mistakes,
I'm
but
new though. I don't know.
there,
I'm a newbie. Like I said, I've only been doing this 5 months, so there's a lot of like these little things that I've never heard of. So,
yeah, I
um,
did the math once. 4% of 4% is like, I think it's like 14 million or something. I can't remember the number is.
mm.
Jonah will know. He's like a supercomputer. He just spouts off these statistics. It's amazing.
I mean, what is it like 8 billion people in the world right now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, I think it's more than that now. Like I thought I heard a number that was like a lot more than that.
Well, let's just go with that for now and see what it looks like. Um, let's just pretend it's 8 billion. 8 billion times, let's see,
Times
times
4%,
point
times 4%.
oh point oh 0.04 equals times 0.04 equals 12.8 million.
12.8. You hear other numbers too, right? Different prophecies. There's 144,000. That's a number I've heard before.
That's
140.
yeah, that's like biblical. I mean that goes into like, you know, Zionist Judeo-Christian prophecies and things like that.
But there would have been less population then too, right? So was it 4% of 4%, right? Is that where Ra updated that calculation through his subconscious because he was well read and was into a lot of things, and that rang true for him in his
Yeah.
subconscious,
Like
right?
there's one is 4 times, 4 or 144,000. I don't know, like someone misread it at the time. I mean, honestly, like whenever you start going back into some of those like biblical prophecies or prophecies that were made by even the ones that didn't make the Bible, like the Book of Stephen, and then like there's a whole archivist of text back in the sort of 3,000 plus years ago that just never made it into any sort of quote unquote religious text, but were still considered divinely inspired, just like all the rest of them at the time. There's a
Mhm.
whole bunch of like really interesting prophecies that were made back then. I've like just assumed that we always get prophecies wrong, so I just don't ever like put too much faith in them because it seems like it's just more of for me again. It's like it would even if it was a satisfying thing or a dissatisfying prediction, either one, it takes me away from the moment that I'm in right now and enjoying that one, which is where like I feel like, especially as a manifesting generator like you, like that's where I would live most of my life is like right here. And if I get too far out there into the future, then it starts to weigh. It starts to put some like existential dread on me or some stress that like takes away from my ability to create and to do and to love and to breathe now. And so, as much as I think it's fun to mentally explore some of these things. I've never really thought about, even if someone said, oh, even if Raw said 4%, 4%, I'm like, cool, whatever. That doesn't mean anything right now. Like it means zero right now in this second. So
Mhm.
I'm not gonna make plans on that. You know.
Well, yeah, and you know what? I'm with you on that today as someone that's spent 2 years deconditioning, but a couple years ago, everything was black and white because I had outsourced my decision making to parents,
Mm.
peers, all sorts of stuff, right? So I mean, yeah, well, we could talk about the whole no choice thing, right? Like, I reject that. I can't, I don't, I think you make choices between, like, in your life, and you can decide how happy you want to be or content. Being a
Yeah,
being a
that's another thing. I've seen it and I kind of read it. And I'm like, don't get
Yeah,
it, don't get it. I have no idea what he's talking about. I
yeah,
mean, I'm sure there's some like real substantive like existential thing to it, and it maybe gives some people some comfort. But like, I was just like, well, okay, whatever. Like, I'm sure that's good for some people. It's just not for me.
yeah. Well, and I think Ra had a defined ajna, right? And so, to me, that means stubbornness. In my experience with
Yeah,
them, and like, they're certain about things even when they're wrong. And that was his words too, right? And I was like, just because the voice, your inside voice, your subconscious said you don't have a choice.
yeah,
That's He channeled that, and some people are. It seems like they're just like, yeah, you don't have a choice. I don't know. I definitely I feel happier rejecting it. So even if I'm
right.
wrong,
My sacral says no, and I'm gonna go with that.
yeah, right, yeah, there you go. Trust strategy is ready. Nope, not good enough for me.
Sacral says
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Fast.
I love catching my wife. She's got a defined ajna. She's a projector, and there's just so many times now where I'm like, she's like, well, I'm sure that. And I'm like, are you sure? She's like, no, it certainly could. Are you certain? She's like, yes, I am. Like, okay, great.
Mhm.
That's so funny.
Yeah. I was talking to a fella a couple of months ago, about 6 months ago, and he didn't know anything about human design. I did introduce him and his wife to it a bit, but even before I got to that, he kept talking about rock people and water people.
Mm,
And at the whole time he described a rock person's for a water versus a water person, rock was absolutely defined ajna and
mhm.
water was not, right? Like it's kind of like something hits a stream and
Yeah.
bump, and it's like, no, you're not getting through.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's, I think, valuable, and sometimes it's incredibly dangerous for the person or those around them if that person is particularly well.
Yeah,
Uh,
there's there as I've, explored this, I've noticed there's a lot of other systems out there that kind of hint at the same thing, or like wait, like ideas or concepts or whatever. And so, the more I explore this, the more I see those sort of like same aspects of our personalities, like in other like, even if it's just like a anecdotes, right? Like my wife, she's a teacher, and she's, drawn to this like parable of like the orchid and the dandelion. Like there's some kids that are dandelions, they can just grow anywhere, like they just put them where they need. And then there's some kids that they need a little bit more shade, or they need a little bit more, of a environment that is conducive to them. Otherwise, they're going to wilt, and it's not. And so, I look at that like, I've got two kids with there. One is 100% a dandelion, and another is like a complete orchid. And they're very much like, the dandelion is my daughter, and she only has one. She's at 8-1. One undefined is emotional. Everything else is defined, triple split. And my son is, he's a manifesting generator, but he's our only defined emotional center. He doesn't have a lot of the other stuff. It's just like three or four things that are connected, and it's his life is a lot more sensitive, and a lot more things can can make things not work for him.
mhm.
And so I see these types of things crop up, and other like ways that people are expressing the self versus not self, or the defined versus the undefined. And it just kind of makes me chuckle now, because I hear it, very often. But it's yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, you made me immediately think of an experience I had last summer with my son in Germany. It's not exactly what you're talking about, but it was that like recognizing his defined solar plexus at the time, and mine's open, right? And just how like, oh man, there he is. That's my boy. So we're my German friend Alex owns a little plane, like a little private plane, and being very German, he's very by the book, very like, it's everything. I knew the plane was safe. I knew the plane was, and but he was also like stating the policies and procedures, very German. And this plane has a parachute, like the plane has a parachute, right? So he went into great detail about like, if I have a heart attack, what you're gonna do is pull this thing, right? And my son's sitting next to him in the jump seat, hearing for the first time, and not really, like if I were on there and it was my plane, I'd be like, if something happened, But he's like, when and if I have a heart attack, you're like just very boom. And so, but meanwhile, my son's like, okay, and he's like, he's cool, right? He's 18, and I'm cool. I'm gonna fly in this plane. I'm in the back seat, and we're taxiing to get on the runway, and all of a sudden, I just feel sick to my stomach, like I'm gonna puke. And I'm thinking, but I'm not afraid. I've flown lots of times. I knew Alex was solid. We had a parachute, um, so I was fine. But I was felt nauseous, and I realized that I could feel my son's solar plexus, like he was going through that emotional wave. And sure enough, he didn't say a thing. I'm totally fine. And then 10 minutes into the flight, he was throwing up into a vomit bag. And once
Oh
he threw
man.
up, I felt better. And but I was with like 4 feet behind him in this jump or this back seat, right? And it was fascinating. Like just like that's what happened there.
You were
And then tried to
feeling that
explain to
for
my son
him,
later,
yeah.
he was not having it. He was just like, "No, I'm totally fine." I'm like, "Oh, dude, you were not." And then
That's
I
funny.
experienced it during the it was a hockey playoffs. He's a big Toronto Maple Leaf fan. Dad taught him that. My bad. And just how emotional he was getting, like when they were losing a game. And I used to be like that, but I'm not. I'm just disinterested now. But just how awful I felt sitting in the same room. And of course, I was eating as well. So, of course, that calm digestion did not like that, right? So it was like something that tasted good all of a sudden was like razor blades going down my throat. So, yeah, it's fascinating, man.
Really is.
That is that in aura experience that's happening more and more, but can be
Oh yeah.
overwhelming. A lot of
Yeah.
people in the room.
I did not appreciate like for me again like how real auric presence is until the last few months. Like I can 100%. I'm not even trying to exaggerate. Like I can. There are times, not all the time, but there have been times where I'm like, oh man, like this is an actual physical thing that I could feel that I just was never aware of before, and it it can affect people. Like others, you know, when you got someone that's in the wrong frequency for you, or you're in the wrong, like it will actually change their physical body and behavior, and will come with it. It's I actually probably would love to study some of the science behind it because I'm sure there is some unique science out there about it, but
Hmm.
I've definitely experienced it as real for me.
Yeah, yeah. And it's happening with a few people that I've gotten to know over the last couple of years, but we all of a sudden can't communicate anymore. It's not pleasant interactions. We both care about each other, but it's just there's a distance there, and it's got to be somewhere in. It seems to be somewhere in that design. Um, it's really interesting when we were on that Discord the other night, and you left earlier, so it was just Trick Light and Fairy there, and my plant medicine kicked in. So like when I take my edibles, about an hour in, there's a wave, but 4 hours in, there's another wave, and it's more amplified. And so I usually even have a timer on my watch because like when it comes, I have to remind myself, okay, I'm not having a psychotic experience. I'm just getting, I forgot that it's been 4 hours, right? But when you left, all of a sudden that penta changed, and I was just like, like, like at one point I was vibrating, and I was like, "What is happening?" And so I took a bio break, and got 20 feet away, and within 3 seconds, I went from feeling high as a kite to straight. I was like, "Okay, that's interesting. This is repeatable." I go back, start hanging. 4 minutes in, I'm like, like it was just like there's something like it's amazing to me that energy can channel through effectively a Zoom call,
Hmm.
right? You're not physically, but there's that energy exchange that's just. So it was like too much. Like it was a nice sensation, but at the same time, it was really
Yeah.
messing with my circuitry.
That's
So.
funny. Oh, well, you know, you say that, that's something that I've been told many times, like prior to knowing about human design, is that if I'm some people like, especially in the corporate world, I'd be pulled into meetings that I had nothing to do with because they were like, hey, like it's just good to have you in there. Like it always
Mm.
seems to go better when you're there. And I'm like, okay, fine, like, you know, like, whatever, like, but now I'm like, oh, it's like there I have the gate 50 defined 3 times in my body chart where it's like, okay, that's like that's the cauldron, it's the balance, it's the one that like can like bring like order to the chaos if there's ever disharmony, like it pulls that in, and it's also my it's in my life's purpose. It's my, you know, my unconscious moon, so, or earth, so
Mm.
it's a strong one in my, from what, like, I guess I expressed just being in a room or being in a, and so it's funny to hear you say that because I've heard something similar to that well before human design, but now that I'm like really trying to embody the knowledge and the information and use my strategy and authority the right way, I can definitely feel it express itself a lot more today than I did in the past. So it's encouraging you say that. Sorry that it went a little bit weird for you, but hopefully it did it all settle back down. Were you guys able to chill and be good,
Well,
or
it's fine. No, I even said like, and part of me is like, I apologize, like just said like, I think I'm just really high, but like these sensations shooting through me. I gotta go, and even just admitting that was kind of like embarrassing and humiliating in the moment. Cause I'm like, am I imagining this? Right? Like I had to kind of say it out loud, which made it like hear myself going, it's okay to be high, right? It's legal. It's fine.
right?
Like all that stuff, right? So, but it's interesting that people like, yeah, like people recognized that you needed to be there. They wouldn't have said, oh, he's got gate 3 or 53 times. Like that's not what
Yeah.
they're thinking, but they, through experience, knew that somehow you did that. And I can say without, at this point, I'll just say it because it's happening. But like there are times where I'm in there and I'm either too much. I'm basically a penta almost by myself, right? So I'm
Hmm.
starting to recognize that like a lot of times I'm too much, and it sucks for me because I end up getting ghosted by people where If I get that moment where I'm like, oh, I know intuitively in the moment because I got
Mhm.
all that circuitry. This is the message, and I have to decide: am I okay with this person never speaking to me again? Because they might
Mhm.
ghost me if they're not ready to hear what's coming. And
Mhm.
and now that I know that I can be strategic and be like, hey, I noticed something. Can I share it with you? That
Mhm.
closes the projection field, and then I give them to it. And I generally often
Good
will
point. Don't be jealous.
get
Right.
ghosted. People will too much truth at once, and especially I got that gate 13, so I'm already this empath vacuum that's drawing stories out of them that they wouldn't otherwise share probably.
Mhm.
So now I
Mhm.
know this secret about them, and if they don't know me well enough to know that I'm not going to disclose it,
Mhm.
they either have to. It's easier for them to ghost me than to face seeing me knowing that I know what they know that they're not going to do something about. Like they're not going to
Right.
do it with that information, but they felt it at
Mhm.
a level where. So I get fucked on that all the time. It
Mm.
sucks. So,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
like in medicine experience, this friend of mine put this beautiful ceremony. Like it was kind of like it was a 3-day thing. It was incredible. And but one of them was writing an emotion on a rock and then chucking it into the ocean. So
Mm.
the rocks are painted white, and then you write on it. And I put alone or loneliness. Like
Mhm.
that is something I feel, and it seems to come from me having the goods to give someone, but and then I have to decide, do I want to give it to them? And so I just
Mhm.
way less now. Like now it's like if I was giving it too much, and I
Mhm.
got burned in the end. And I'm not saying what
Yeah.
I was saying was perfect or profound, but sometimes it's exactly I just know intuitively, and
Right.
it burns deep. So.
That's why I tell my wife, like, doesn't matter if you're a projector or not. If you have projector channels, they are a project. It's in the word. Like they are something that you're constantly working on, helping
Mhm.
yourself use in the right way, because they're a project, man. It's something that each person's experience is so unique and different whenever they're like using those channels, that um it can often sometimes feel like I'm just gonna say what I need to say. Like I can't do this, like, too much, not enough. I just gotta, you and is 2034 a projected channel? I forget.
I don't remember.
Well, if
It
it
was
is,
way. Oh, it was if it comes from the sacral, it's not a projected channel. I think is what made
okay.
it in. So no, I don't think 3420 is, but 3313,
Yes,
81,
you're
731. Yeah.
but your 5720 is
Mhm.
your 1020 is right.
Yeah, it's interesting when you broke that word out, project. So like the next time it'll be like, do I want this project or not?
Right. Yes. Yes.
Right?
Is this a project I want to take on or no?
Yeah. That checks a box because
Hmm.
thank you for that, because that's quite literally I take on too many other people's projects, and I get fucked for it, and
Hmm.
I'm not getting anything out of it, so fuck
Yeah.
that.
That's why I told my wife, like, don't think of it, don't like ignore the word projector. It's project manager. Like, you are there to help other people do what they need to do. You are not there to do all of that doing. Like if you're gonna be a project manager, do that. Like, don't try to like carry it, because she gets so exhausted and she gets so wiped out and she gets so frustrated and bitter that she's not able to do all of that stuff. That's what she gets frustrated, that she's not a generator, right? And bitter that she has to tell other people how to do it whenever they've not always invited her, and so be a project manager. Wait for them to put you in the position to do that and enjoy. And since she's done that, oh my gosh, it's made her life so much easier.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, that's why I like that condensed version. Just, do I want to take that project on or not?
Hmm. That for me is the takeaway for today. That's very interesting, and only to learn about those projector channels recently, or projected channels.
Hmm.
I had interpreted it completely differently.
How did you
MBT.
interpret it?
I thought people were projecting onto me because that's how I had the 5 line referred to me, right? They project onto me that I got the answers for them, even if I don't. Like
Mm,
that, it's we've all had heavy lives, but when I think about my life as a 3-5, um, with all that openness, completely open head and ajna, but very stubborn, conditioned parents that, yeah, it's like life was a trip.
mm,
And,
I bet.
so, but yeah, and people do seem to come to me for answers, and then in the past, if I spoke someone else's words, like you should, like, I don't use the word should. If I hear the word should spoken to me, or I hear it, like, I can't even say the word should,
Mm,
because it's not my job to help people make decisions for people. It's
hmm
to ask them questions so that they can make decisions. And I think, like, you don't want to outsource your decisions. And I think
No.
that's also why I don't like the no choice thing. Like, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna let that notion decide on my choices. I just refuse. So,
Yeah.
hmm. I love
Yeah.
the sacred question we asked earlier. That was useful. Like, even just hearing myself, like, feeling it, like, okay,
Yeah.
you know.
But that's the other thing I'd sort of taken away, because one of my channels off of the sacral is the 5027, and um and you probably feel it around a lot of those channels that come off the sacral, but it's the responsibility, right? Responsibility is like, if someone is responsible, what does that mean to you? That means that they're trustworthy, right?
Mhm,
And the sacral is about responsibility. It's from the word to respond, right? Response ability, right? Do I have the ability to respond in a way that trusts my own gut, right?
mhm,
Because you can take the word responsibility or responsible and switch it out for trust or trustworthiness all you want. Is this person responsible? Is this person trustworthy?
mhm,
It's the same thing. It's the same thing for yourself and your sacral. Do I trust this response? If I do, if I'm letting myself trust that response, I'm being responsible to myself and I'm being
mhm.
responsible to others. And so trusting the response is like how we're like that's the most important part for me of embodying this whole thing, is getting so comfortable with that response that there is no, I don't have to worry about trustworthiness. It just is, and I just do it.
Yeah, I've had such a hard time trusting that sacral response. Is your spleen defined?
My spleen is defined.
Yeah, because that's a bit of an authority too, right? And it's that whisper in the now
Mm-hmm.
that,
Mm-hmm.
and when I think back, especially in the last year, reflecting on times where I was like, I now remember the whisper, and I
Mm-hmm.
also remember the consequences of. I forget what Gator Channel it is, but like there is one, like, when I've committed to something, I have to see it through to the end, and it's that sucks. So I really got to listen to to
I think
that.
it's probably your 57, or yeah, you're probably your 57, isn't it?
I
Is that
thought
the
it
one?
I
Or is
thought
it
it
another one off the sacral?
was 29, like, it's because there's sort of like an integrity there as well. Like,
Yeah.
I said I'm gonna do it. I don't have the willpower because I said,
But I said, but I'm gonna, because I
but I
got
said
it.
I'm gonna, or I'm gonna do it, or I need to see this through to get the lesson at the end.
Yeah.
The lessons are expensive and painful, and
Geez, you have 10 channels?
yeah,
That's wild, man.
yeah. And it's funny, but someone on Facebook the other day said, I just saw someone that had 8 channels, and, like, I can't believe that. And I put, I've got
Yeah,
10.
got
But
10.
then I put, like, I'm not bragging because I don't know how to drive this fucking thing. But if you think eight's a lot, I seem to be mucking up 10 of them. So
That's so wild. Yeah, and then you've got so many that go from, like, you got all three that go straight from the G center to the throat. Like, man, that's a lot of it's a lot of direction, right? That's probably where you feel like people think you're too much, is because it's just like the
yeah,
expression is so from a place of self, like, even if you got the spleen connection, you can hear and you can see it. It's coming from that place of self so intensely that it's hard for them to, like, take. It's like, whoa, oh man, like, I can't. Like I gotta, you know. So I feel your pain on that, but I'm looking at that and that hits right away for me. Like,
Yeah. Well, are you going to keep talking? Because I'm enjoying this, but we're at the almost
oh yeah,
closing our mark. But I have energy to go. But I was going to say, if you want to bring up bodygraphs and let's talk about some of these channels and gates that we have,
yeah.
because
Let me see. Hold on. Let me just. That is a good reminder. Let me do a time check real quick. See where my wife's at because she's about to barge in here with two small children, and it will go. It will be ended
fair enough.
with or without our permission. Um, or sacred response. Okay, so she's in Plano right now. Yeah, I got at least 15, 20 minutes left.
Okay. Well, why don't you pull up our bodygraphs?
Yep.
And something you said there has since passed.
About your expressive nature between your G center and your throat.
Well, yeah these channels, the projected channels, like some kind of the reluctant leader or
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
elected reluctant leader. Um,
Yeah.
I got this intuitive in the moment. Like, so a former employee of mine, he worked for me for 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
The number of times he said, I've heard him say to other people, rarely to me, but to other people, like, Sean just knows. I don't know how he does it. But
Mm-hmm.
I didn't believe it or know it myself, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
how do you prove that you know in the moment? Like, people want proof. And then with that 3-5 life of just like, well, you didn't get that right. Like, that's what gets thrown in my face is it has
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with my knowing now. It's that 3 years ago I did something, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, my wife is a very good record keeper of what I've done wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
That 6'2" judgy, like, it's like, well, last time that didn't work. So
Right.
and she's got the 731 as well, right? So we got like double alpha.
Oh wow,
She has
nice.
the same open centers as me. Like, she's at my wife's design is actually quite similar to mine.
Oh no, so you guys are 4-0 or like
We're better to be free, which is something that now when we heard that, I thought, oh shit, we're getting divorced. That's not.
wait, hold on. Four, so you each have four defined centers and they're the same ones?
Mhm.
So she's a manifesting generator also.
Yep, 6'2".
Oh nice. Well then that actually helps that she's a 6-2 and you're a 3-5 because
Mhm.
those can vibe.
Yeah, the 3-5 wounded genetic shame eyebrow raise. Like, once I became aware of it, it was like such a relief to be like, oh, that's why you can't even help it. Like, you just, the number
Mm-hmm.
of sixes that I've asked, and it's again one of my parlor tricks. If someone on Facebook's like, I don't understand my chart, I see the 6-2, and they'll talk about 3-5s, and I like ask that 3-5. What do you roll your eyes at them, and does it like absolutely trigger them? And almost every time they're like, yeah, right. It comes with this can't get anything right. Then
Mm-hmm.
there's that 6 that's kind of up on the roof and disassociated and not really getting involved, but still seems to know better than everybody. It's kind of like a
Yeah. Yeah,
divine.
exactly. Yeah, no, that it's the I've often and I've been a real it's a real knife's edge to balance because I have a very strong pull to like mentor and to help and to engage other people that are on a journey of self discovery and spirituality and all that stuff. But then I'm also like I'm a baby. Like I like I don't know anything really.
Mhm. And it's not your job, right? And that is kind of the whole, like, when the student's ready, the teacher appears. That kind of whole, like, when do you deliver, right?
Mhm.
Uh,
Right.
yeah, cool. Do you want to? Are you able to share your?
Do you, yeah, I've got my do you mean to pull it up on the like a share screen?
Yeah, there's a button there. It says share screen.
Let me yes, let me do that. Let me just pull it
I
up
gotta figure out
here.
how to get this other app to show my iPad again. Because
Uh,
I'd rather use the Neutrino Design app, but
I would too. I've only got the My Mechanics one on my desktop.
yeah,
Um, I gotta make Google Chrome allow this to happen real quick. One sec.
cool.
Uh, yes. Okay. Got it.
By the way, this is Bucky the land shark here. I don't know if you can. That's a drawing that I saw on a chalkboard at
Bucky the
school.
Land Shark. That's cool.
Yeah, and then it's become kind of like a avatar of sorts lately.
Let me know if you can see this.
I can
Cool.
adding.
This this is me. I gotta put yours in there. It's just got me and my wife. So let me add yours. New personal chart. How do you spell your last name again?
Bridge, BRIDGE.
All right. You
This is
are.
something as well. Like you're about to enter all of my personal information in here, and I'm
Yeah.
fine with it.
Yeah.
You got that backwards though. It's 0502
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
Canadian. But I noticed that a lot of folks, there's a lot that won't share their body graph, but they give readings.
Like,
And
yeah, I don't see why it's a like it's a me again. I'm open about all of this stuff. Like,
mhm.
I have no struggle whatsoever with regards to sharing my stuff because it just helps me. It helps me learn more, right? But I do know, like some people view this as a like you know very personal and like shouldn't be shared unless you're like really with someone you trust. Where were you born again?
The time is AM too.
Oh, man, got it.
And find it really interesting that when you were hovering over countries, you were like hovering over Bermuda for quite a bit. Because I lived there for
Oh,
5 years, and my daughter was born there.
you were? That's
Yeah.
wild.
She's not Bermudian. Like she can't be. They will not give her citizenship because it's such a small place.
Wild.
She's basically an alien, right? But
Yeah.
manifest her alien. Uh, Actually, I've never looked at her variables. That'd be funny if she's an elf. Anyways, North York, but often it doesn't appear. So if that doesn't work, try Toronto. Same time zone. Yeah, just do Toronto. I'll be in North York on Saturday for my hypnosis course. That's where I was born too. So going back there to drink the water, get it right out of the system.
Wow. Here we go. All right. That's yours.
Right. So that open head and ajna. So this is the feedback I get often. Don't see that very often.
Yeah.
And then all the
The leftness.
protected, yeah, all of that. Like so, it's so interesting to me that everything I hear about my incarnation cross and my design, I was so uh, not self or conditioned. Like it's
Hmm.
hard to imagine how off I was a couple years ago, and
Hmm.
how uncomfortable it is to lean into this. But every time I do, it gets better. But
Yeah.
like everyone tells me, I'm designed to be selfish, and there was no worse offense in my home growing up. Like
Than being selfish.
oh, that was it. You could murder someone, and that wasn't selfish, right? Like so, it's pretty interesting when I think about my life and path and trajectory and all these things,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah. So but you've got a lot of like interesting things that I'm seeing here because you got a lot of dormant gates too, right?
mm,
You got one, two, three, four dormant gates, meaning that in your relationships, there could be a lot of circumstances where you may define another center, one of these two centers with someone to like with them, right? So like for example, my wife and I define our solar plexus together because both of ours are undefined. I have the 22, she has the 12.
yeah.
And so we experience emotions through that channel together whenever it's, it's being used. Do you
Mhm.
find that at all with some of these other ones, like where you're experiencing emotions through like your 55 through someone else's 39, whether it's hanging or dormant for them?
Oh yeah, I think so. Sometimes I can't recognize that that's what's happening, but
Mm.
when you do the composite of my wife, the only thing we have open is the heart, whereas everything like we close everything else off together.
Oh. So she's she is one, two, three, four.
Oh
Like,
no, like she's open root, open solar plexus, open heart, open head, open ajna.
mhm.
When we come together, there's just this open heart, and
Oh, I got you because it's because you're matching each other's
yeah, like
dormant gates. I
all
got
the
you.
things, right? It's pretty interesting.
Wow, that is cool.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
then
my
we talked about like the future is all heart, like that's
mm,
where and openness is where you're here to gain wisdom.
mhm.
You know,
Yeah,
it's
my this is my wife and I's. We are 7-2. This is where we define the solar plexus together.
mhm.
She defines my root. I define her sacral. She defines my ajna.
Hmm.
Um, so we've got, we got like five. We got a bunch of we've only got one compromise. It's this one right here, 5818,
Mhm.
channel of judgment. But that one was really easy to get over. Honestly, that one took zero time to work through. and then everything else is either, you know, dominant one or the other, or electromagnetic, like here, 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 and I think that's it. Here, 5. So
Yeah, we have like 2 electromagnetic channels, but I have lots of dominant channels. So
yeah, you got 10 of them, man.
right?
Like,
And
geez.
it's funny, like, but she's an alpha too. But I said to, I think it was Nathan, no, maybe it was Leanne. I said, like, I guess I'm the alpha of the alphas in our house, and she was like, oh, it's an interesting way to put it, but I think I was correct.
Yeah.
Like I can't help it. It's not. I don't want to be that, but
Hmm.
I'm not even in control of how others absorb it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I find it fascinating that, like, there's not a single hanging or dormant gate anywhere close to the heart for you. So,
yeah.
like, yeah, like, for me, I've got a couple things that I've got one that hangs off of it. I've got one that points to it, but you've got, like, it's a nothing. Like,
Oh, man's
so,
land.
so, which for me growing up, I had, of course, a lot of, like, I loved proving people wrong, that was just part of my, like, I don't know. If you just told me I couldn't do something, I was like, oh, okay, well, you know, I'm now gonna have to do it. Like, especially if it was something I was, like, already interested in. Like, if I was doing something and someone said I couldn't achieve this while I was doing it, it's never like, something I wasn't already invested in. Does that make sense? Like, someone said, well, you're never gonna be the world's greatest Olympic swimmer. I'm like, yeah, no shit. Like, like, it's just.
Mhm.
But if it was like, oh, like, you couldn't be class president, or you couldn't, do whatever, like something that I was, like, sort of already involved in, it was like, it would just solidify, like, my willpower to, like, do whatever it was I was supposed, like, that they said I couldn't do. Did
Mhm.
you, I mean, having zero, like, connections to it in any direction, did that, how did that work for you? How was that experience for you?
I think the only thing I could say is confusion. Like,
Mhm.
didn't know why I cared, but I did. But I think it's because everyone said I should care,
Mm.
and so
And they were often very certain about it. So you're like, well, I'm not certain about it, and I definitely don't feel like, but now I'm confused by it.
yeah. Well, some of the best advice I've gotten were so simple. Like someone said, with my open ego, I have nothing to prove. Just relax.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah,
You don't
once
even
I
have
saw that, I was like, oh, okay, well, that's great. That makes me feel a lot better.
Yeah,
Um,
like it's a relief. Like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna just accept that as an answer. They might not even be right, but I'm like, after 50 years, I'm gonna take the win on that one. And
mhm.
then the open head and ajna, John, his name, last name, but I was just like, so I got this completely open head and ajna. Like, what am I supposed to do this? I've got nothing to grab onto.
Yeah.
Like, just like
I love it though, man.
your mind's here to entertain you.
I
Period.
love it. It's just so funny because I don't know if you remember, like, the first time I saw your chart, I was like, this is like my big brother. Like, come on, man. Like, because you were so close to mine. I mean, literally, we have the same senders, active, and we had so much of this going on. You've obviously got the 57. I don't, but I was like, man, this guy could teach me about how to be me a little bit. Like, you've got more years of experience under your belt in the experiment, and you've got,
Mhm.
such a close. I would actually be interested in what our composite looked like. What kind of party that would be. But I told you, I was like, man, we should get together and, like, play some drums and tell each other all the cool stuff that we know, and here we are doing it. I love it, man.
Yeah, well, and Nathan keeps saying I need to find a generator with the 14. So, you bring that, and I'm like, damn, we got to figure out how to make that work. Why don't you do a composite for us? Like, I'd be curious to see it. And I have tons of 6.2s in my fractal, so it makes sense that, here's another one kind of thing, right? Like, it's,
Yeah. Well, let's see if I can do. Let's see, how do I do that? Do I do a? Let's do a new composite, right?
or
Connection.
yeah, they call it connection there. Yeah.
Yeah, me and you. Let's create it and see what that looks like. Oh yeah, baby. Yeah. So there is. Let's see. One electromagnetic channel, the 214, which is what you're talking about. A lot of companionship channels, which is the, like, sharing the same thing.
Yeah.
We compromise here and here, which, again, I knew the 57 was going to be a big part of that because that's the one that I don't have on that whole little circuit over there. Um, But then this one, which is interesting, you've got the full channel. I've only got the one, but I've got the one 3 times. So I bet that makes me really want to feel that eight, like feel that eight from through you,
Hmm.
which is fascinating. And then you've got what do you
So,
got?
and what are the three dominance channels? It looks like you dominate me at the first one, which
Yeah.
most charts that's rare. I'm usually the dominant one, but what are
Yeah.
the other two there? It's blocked by the or what is it?
I can't really tell. Oh, this one. For you dominate there and here, or I dominate here.
Hmm, fascinating.
Yeah.
The other thing too, and I think I'm finally starting to understand the Chiron thing. Like it's a theme that I'm going through. It doesn't change my body graph, but I have the 515 channel. So effectively, if you were to view it as like our body graphs create a penta, if you count the theme of my Chiron,
Mm.
and I also have the 45 in my Chiron, and then my actual Chiron theme is the 21. So theoretically, if you kind of view it that way, I have 12 channels, and that 45-21 in a way is completed for me or a theme. Like I know I for a while was kind of viewing it like they were upgrades I got, and in a way it kind of feels true, but I guess it doesn't really change my day to day design. So
How do I know which one my Chiron is?
I don't know if my mechanics will do it. Do new chart again and just see if there's an option there to.
Well, would it be in my in the neutrino app?
Yes, yeah, it's in there. The other one that would do it is genetic matrix.
Oh, okay. So it says Chiron return, but it was what?
If you look under Astro HD,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Astro HD will tell you I guess it's like the theme of your Chiron. So I think mine is 21-1. And
Mine is
then
20. Mine is 21. 20.1.
okay, which is where's the 20? Oh yeah, right, of course the 20. Yeah, coming out of your throat.
Yeah, and then the six. My personality is the 16.2, and then
Hmm.
the design is 21.
Yeah, so like in a way, you and I complete even that 45-21. Like that's a lot of horsepower. So um,
That's awesome.
yeah, it's weird, man. Well,
That's
like, and I don't feel like I should be anyone's mentor, right? I have lived and felt a bumbling life of fuck ups, but I guess
Mhm.
really I know the value I add is I know what to tell you not to do. Like,
Yes, that's what
don't
I
do
love.
that. I've tried that.
Yeah, that'll
That's a
get you 5 to 10.
yeah. I know
That's
what,
so cool.
and I'm not even trying to make a mistake. It just finds me, and
Mhm.
that part's tough. But
Well, that's that is the nature of the way you grow, though, right? I grow one way, you grow another way, but it doesn't mean that we're not buried in the same soil, you know?
well, yeah, and with the 6-2, you led that 3 lifestyle when you were younger.
Mm,
Yeah.
sure did. Yep. I've been arrested 3 times.
Oh well.
Um, I've got a whole bunch of tattoos I probably shouldn't have. I have a child that I wasn't expecting from my first marriage. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff. Like I love my all of my children, and but I tell you, like that's been my biggest learning. That's like my three, like my six is being reminded, hey, like you learn from these things. Like I have a 14-year-old son, and like he was zero planned, and like he has been one of the biggest catalysts for growth in my entire life.
Hmm.
And it was through that three experience of the quote unquote mistake or whatever, even though I don't view it as a mistake, but that like sort of trial and error thing that I'm still super grateful that the six has that to it. Like I haven't just been on a roof the whole of my life. I was able to like spend a good chunk of my life getting dirty and figuring it out, and now going through this process of aggregating that wisdom and sort of like really letting it sink in for myself, and then eventually being able to share it in a meaningful way with others. That's a good part of my life's calling, and I know it's obviously not yours, but for me, like that's a super motivator for me long term, which is pretty fun.
Hmm. Funny when you were talking about getting arrested. Like I've never been arrested,
Mm,
but I've got this design of like this anarchist. Like
mm,
it's kind of shocking to me that I haven't been at this point, but I've always been a good boy, right? And that's why I
Oh,
never touched plant medicine until 50. Was I grew up in the war on drugs, and I look
mhm,
at it with gratitude. Like I think with my potential addictive personality, well, addictive in many other ways,
mhm,
if I had discovered weed, I mean, I was aware of it. In fact,
right,
I got fucked over by not smoking weed as a drummer. Like
right.
I go to an audition, loved my playing. They want to go smoke a joint after and talk about next steps, and I'd be like, "Oh no, I don't smoke." That was it. I was out. Like they didn't
Wow,
trust me, right? I
that's
couldn't, but it
wild.
wasn't. I didn't wasn't judging them. It was just like my mom and dad would be disappointed, so I'm not going to do it.
That's so funny, man. Because like I had the exact opposite experience. Like I was the good kid, and like I was like, I gotta like, I gotta like not be for a while, you know. Like I was like, I need to like fucking like be a bad kid or try it, and it felt so inauthentic. Oh man.
Oh, really?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I like every time I was like, man, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Like, I guess just chalk it up to another dumb decision, like whatever. Like, but there are so many cases in my life where, like, I told you, like, I got my genetic wound is abandonment because I was adopted and I got passed around by a bunch of different members of the family, and eventually I got adopted, but I was just so scared that people were going to leave me that I was always trying to do the right thing for my whole life up until like, basically 18. And then once it was like, well, you're on your own, it was like, well, if there's no one here to like tell me right or wrong, I'm just going to try it all, let's see what happens. And every time I did something that felt, like I was trying to be the bad kid, I was like, this doesn't feel good at all. Like, what am I trying to fill here that's not missing, And then, and then I had my son at, I was 26 years old. I was like, man, I really don't need to mess with all that, like doing stupid shit stuff anymore. I could probably just like try to be a, try to be good and it be okay. And I don't have to blame it on like my childhood traumas or anything. I'm just gonna try to like be a good person. And he was like my motivator for that. And, yeah, ever since then, it's like, I definitely have a little bit more of a Han Solo vibe than maybe a Luke vibe, but um it doesn't I'm great with that. I don't have doesn't mean I have to like just go make bad choices, just for the sake of doing it like I used to.
Oh man, so many things there. So we were talking about Myers Briggs. You've probably seen like the various movie characters done as Myers Briggs. So I'm an INFJ, which I think is Luke.
Mm.
But the thing is, I've always felt like I needed to be Luke, but I think I'm a design of Han Solo. Like
Okay.
I'm like uh, left and pissed off, and then while Luke's in the tunnel trying to shoot things and the Tie Fighters are coming, I'll fly in and woohoo, but then still get the fuck out of there, right? Like
Right.
starting to understand that I always loved Han, but didn't feel like I could relate to him. He was too cool,
Mm.
and now I'm like, maybe I need to be a bit more Han.
Let's see
Um,
what Han Solo is ESTP.
that's literally the opposite of an INFJ. Like
Right.
it's literally the polar opposite.
Oh man, that's funny. My actual one is ENFP or ENTP. So I'm ENFP is the one that's probably the most dominant, but that's Qui-Gon Jinn,
Okay,
the
yeah,
champion, the idealist, the enthusiast, inspiring, creative, blah blah blah, all that like the stuff that like I had like tried to not be whenever I was, before I was 30.
yeah, but that makes sense. And even as a 6'2", that kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned trauma before. I'm trying to remember what line 4 is in Design Mars. What's your genetic trauma in neutrino design?
Abandonment.
That's not one of the 6 types, actually.
I made it up. It's for mine. That's the one I'm.
Okay.
It's what I'm using.
Okay.
It's rejection. Rejection.
Yeah, I was gonna say rejection. Like when you described it, it was the rejection I heard.
Yeah.
So,
It says rejection is the fear of being rejected or abandoned. So.
okay, well, yeah. So there you go.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean that's what got me. That's what really pulled me into human design was the Chiron return. Like you're here to break the chain of your genetic trauma. So you will reject people in order to not be rejected. You'll do it first. And mine's shame, right?
Mm.
I live in a house where 3 people in my house have guilt. And I'm like, as soon as I saw that, I was like, that was a relief. Because like, why do I always feel guilty in my own home no matter what I do? And it's like I got 3 auras
Mm,
that are trying not to feel guilt, so they project it onto me. And
mhm.
so,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
shame is that like I am bad, right?
yeah.
Like that's like the lowest frequency, man. That shame is shame is brutal to pull yourself out of, because if you identify yourself as the bad, not as the the guilt of doing the bad, it's like, what do you do? Like, you're basically saying like there's nothing that can be done. I am bad, you know.
Mm.
And that's where a lot of I've heard a lot of three lines, especially the like that person that was the 6-3 I was talking to. They were like, yeah, like I just, and sure enough, that was their same genetic trauma, was that that feeling of like just always being ashamed, like that they couldn't like be around other people, otherwise they were, or whatever it was that they wanted to do or wanted to be or whatever would, you know,
Yeah.
wasn't good enough, right? It wasn't worthy.
That three is awful. Like, so, if you look at any of the sort of charts of the worst feeling to bliss, shame is at the bottom. Like, it's shame,
Yes,
then
yes.
guilt, like anger, and like there's things that on the surface sound like they'd be worse, but
Hmm.
they're not.
No,
Shame is like,
shame is the bottom. Yep, it's the. In fact, actually, I have one of those little things with me right now. I was going to pull it up. Yeah, shame is the bottom. Then guilt, then apathy, then grief. Those are
mhm,
like the bottom four. Then you got the sort of fear, like anger, desire. Then you got pride, which then it starts to flip. Then it becomes courage, neutrality, willingness, acceptance, reason, love, joy, peace, enlightenment, or bliss.
mhm.
Um, but shame is all the way down there. It's it's humiliation, it's misery, it's despising, it's eliminating. It's like all of the words that you accompany with like the very worst things you could possibly feel. Like, and having that as your genetic trauma is just like the, obviously experiencing it, no way to help other people understand it, like, because it just is the way it is. But I my hope is, the idealist in me is that like that's where you can, that's like those people have the most that they can grow in a lifespan. Like, if you said I want shame as my genetic trauma, because I want to speed run this thing. Like, I want to make sure that I'm going to level up like at least one or two this incarnation. That's what I'm going to choose.
That's a whole conversation for sure. Like, talking about reincarnation, I've had several. Like, I without a doubt know that my soul picked this meat sack for this journey, and I guess I said, like, I want to be a drummer that's gonna feel the low of lows, and
Hmm.
where I really kind of coming back to that that weekend, and the fact that MDMA was the first part, right? Like, that was so profound. My guides for that asked all sorts of questions leading up to my ceremony, and by the time I got there, I was like, okay. Like, when he fed back the questions to me, I was like, okay, clearly I have mom issues, that mother wound, and like we all have those.
Yep.
And then what seemed like maybe an hour in MDMA was 6, but it was
Mm,
audio recorded, and
mm,
I couldn't listen to it for 5 months. And
wow.
if I had the courage to listen to it 3 days
Hmm.
later, I would have created, like, I would have got rid of 5 months of doing it the long way. Because by the time I went through my own process, anyways, of avoiding listening to it,
Yeah.
when I listened to it, I was saying things in it that I had as profound insights later. Like,
Hmm.
literally, a bumper sticker would pop in my mind, but I said it in that MDMA state.
Hmm.
And also, 6 hours when you listen to the tape, I when I could hear myself saying the things I was saying, I knew what I was going to say next. The whole
Wow.
6 hours, like, I was like, oh shit, I'm about to say this. Like, I just knew,
Wow.
listening to it was like, that's that internal voice, and here comes the
Hmm.
next one, and here comes the next one. It was fucking.
That's why, and that there's a one of those centers up by where you live in Canada.
This was up island, so it was a couple's home. So,
Oh, okay.
super. It's really interesting, but I'm super grateful for that experience, how I got there, everything. Because
Hmm.
I was introduced to plant medicine. Like, I literally smoked a joint once and did it wrong, so I never even got the high.
Hmm.
Very successful alcoholic, but um, it was plant medicine, it was meditation, it was breath work, and it was a couple of questions with the Laura. I forget the book, but anyway, the one human design book that a lot of people refer to. They
Hmm.
had it, and they just asked this question like, if someone told you that the pot was hot on the stove, would you believe them or would you have to touch it? And I was like, oh, I'd have to touch it. They're like, oh yeah, well, and as soon as I heard that, I was like, that's me. And that was the parlor trick for me. That was what caught me. It still took me months to kind of go back and revisit it, but I never forgot. And then I had to go through the whole like, oh my god, am I joining Scientology? Like you said,
Right.
it's like, fuck, this is weird shit.
Yeah, yeah. Like literally, that's why I approach this with the like sort of white gloves with new people. I just say like it's Myers Briggs for spirit work, if that's what you want to call it, right?
Yeah, or
Um,
Enneagram, like that's another one that you can
yeah,
throw in.
Enneagram for your spirit. And you know what's interesting though is like this younger generation, like they, our job was to sort of break free from the religious structures and institutions because they obviously weren't serving us as a collective as they should. And I think this new generation, they are wanting to fill that void because obviously, like in my home, I'm not, we don't preach anything. Like we're not, we just, you explore what you, and as they do, as they're sort of reclaiming some of that for themselves. And whether it's astrology or things like human design or just even just mindfulness through, sort of meditation and some of the Buddhist practices there, it just is really encouraging for me to see that, like this new generation has an emotional awareness that I just could not fathom when I was a kid. Like, I mean, for example, my 14-year-old son, in his friend group, and this is not an exaggeration, in his friend group of boys, he's 14. One of them is a transgender girl. Like, no one bats an eye. They don't even think about it. Like, they just accept and love and like what the hell is going on here? Like, like
Mm-hmm.
that would not have worked in 1980s or 90s. Like they would have been like, no, freak, get out of here. Like, like we're gonna be like cool like bullies over here. Like a lot of them just. I mean, I'm sure there still is like some of that goes on, but I am seeing way more of the emotional intelligence being spoken through the youngest generation right now, and it's so encouraging to me that
Yeah.
that whatever transformation does happen, or maybe if whatever will happen in the future, it's going to be through them. And if it is, I'm like super excited about it.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like they're reincarnated souls that were, you know, 30 years ahead of us. They've died, they've come back,
Uh-huh.
and and then just the collective knowledge and consciousness of people talking about stuff more openly and like literally government propaganda and laminating shit and they just can't even deliver it fast enough to fight what's coming in the opposite direction. And
Mhm.
that's what's happening, right? Is people are going, they're questioning everything, and those at the top are like flailing around like they've lost complete
Right,
control.
because again, they're fixed to the old way of thinking, right? Which is that you things are a fixed way, and the new generation's like, no, things are not that way. Things are moving, and and I know there's some of that comes with every generation, right? But this one just feels like more transformative because it doesn't feel like it's an iteration of the old way. It feels like it's a total breaking away from the old way, which is emotionally aware and emotionally centered and loving first, not let's think our way through this problem and maybe we can find a better way to do this little thing here. It's a total new, like, we're wiping the slate clean and we're playing a new game, which is awesome. I'm really encouraged by it.
Yeah, same. It's I've had a couple weird experiences. One was I was at an arcade with my friends in Maryland, and it was the weirdest experience. I was there with two guys that I traveled with years ago, so they're both like 50, 51, 52.
Hmm.
We're at the arcade. One guy's there with his son, and the one kid that was giving out the tokens for the video games, um, we just the guys couldn't understand what he was telling them. Like he was almost speaking a different language. Like, and it was
Mhm.
the kid was definitely neurodivergent. And now that I recognize that I am, and I've just been really good at masking it and stuff, and through some of the work I've done, I felt like I was an interpreter between my old crew and
Mhm.
this other crew. And the kid, even like when my friends left, he looked me right in the eyes and just said, "You're different." and I, and the thing is, like 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to have that conversation with them. I would have been just the same as them, right? But I
Yeah.
felt like I was like a conduit or a translator between
Mm.
my generation now and this younger generation. The
That's
ones that
awesome.
I struggle with are millennials. Like they just, it's just like the narcissism there is off the charts, and it's
Yeah,
hasn't
I'm
been.
a, I'm a millennial. I mean, that's
I don't.
like I'm the old version of the millennial. I'm the sort of Oregon Trail generation, the late, early 80s baby. But my wife is too, and she's 10 years younger than me. She's the mid 90s. And so even that little 10-year span, like there's a big difference, like and but you're right, because I think the my generation was like fed this optimism, like that was totally fake, like like everything's awesome, just keep going, like we're gonna do it, you're gonna be great.
Yeah.
Where the Gen X group like had been like sort of pulled through the muck of like the BS of the 70s. And like, I mean, my dad's he's 56. He's like, as absolutely the stereotype for his generation, like like just you just don't overthink things, like just get it done, like make some
Mhm.
money, like get out of you, stop asking so many questions. And my group's like, no, like, does this work this way? Is this supposed to be like? And then I think for a lot of people, let it felt like a self-fulfilling sense of like, okay, well, if my parents obviously don't know the answers, then that means I must have them, and if I have them, then that means you know everyone needs to hear them, and
Mhm.
I'm going to stay fixed to that. Which I think you're right. I don't know if it's necessarily a pure narcissism with everyone, but it is definitely a fixed center of thinking. Like it's like you guys have been lying this whole time, and now since you're lying, we're gonna have to just you know be miserable and right.
Well, yeah, and it's not even like it's not their fault. It's what how they were groomed and conditioned, and it
Yeah.
really maybe they are the first of the I generation that Ra's talking about, right? Really, but they just don't have it. They haven't got it right, so they're like the bull in the china shop. And from
Mm-hmm.
what I can tell, and I don't, I'm gonna, I'm not even sure if I'm right about this, but it seems like projectors are a newer type, right? And there's more of them versus less of them, and it seems to be in that millennial generation. And the other thing I've heard and I've witnessed is there seems to be nothing worse than a not self projector. Like they are a traitor to themselves and others. And
Yeah.
having almost lost businesses in my arguably my life, there is a trend between two people that have been in my life in the last 5 years that they were both 6'4" mental projectors with deaf gates. And now that I understand that, it's such a relief because I can forgive them and myself, but they were
Mm-hmm.
horribly misguided, stuck in victim state instead of survivor state.
Yeah.
I'll fuck anyone over before they fuck me, even though I'm showing up doing everything I can to help, right? And I've got this rescuer vibe that there's something in that 3-5 of wanting to save everybody. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's very messy, but
Yeah. My wife is a splenic projector. This is her chart.
okay.
Um, but she's of the projector millennial vibe that's like the always self-doubting, like never, like she has just like
Well, that open G, look at that thing. There's
yeah,
nothing off that.
right, yeah, so she's always been like unsure of, like, even though she's got this like the defined ajna, like when it comes to like anything relating to things that are outside of her like comfort zone,
Mm-hmm.
like I just and like she has done everything on hard mode because of this 1858. I mean, like just intense judgment, intense like you know like I can't even make a choice about the future because I'm worried about the regret I'll feel if I make the wrong choice in the future. Right? Like I'm judging everything so intensely that like I cannot even experience, even though you think the spleen is like more than now, This one puts her such into like this future mind of like, I'm already worried about the now feeling of not feeling good by making the wrong choice now. And this like lack of direction for her has been the biggest one, because it obviously, impacts things like being in relationships and making, where's my career choice going to be fulfilled at, and so like right now she's a teacher, and like as great as she is so good at being a teacher, she just is so consumed with the worry that she's not enough and that she's not fulfilling her purpose the way she should be, and that she's like, all these like really like bring my vibe all the way down. And so like, but when we're together, like, it's like real magic, because like she has confidence, that I guess I give her that some of those confidence to like just, no, this is great, we're doing awesome.
Yeah.
She gives me the like the root of like, hey, like, no, like, don't get complacent, buddy, like, there's like, you have kids to feed, like, like keep fucking going, like. And then we got this like really magical like thing that happens here where like she'll be thinking and not having the words, and then I'll give her the words, and or like, she can just project, her aura will just say without saying it, I love you. And then I will say like this is it, like we're bonded. I mean, like truly, we had one date, we said I love you, and then she moved in like the next day, and like we've been together for 10 years. Like,
Okay, so a couple things. It'd be interesting to check the transits for that date. Was the 6 in transit? Like,
oh
was
yeah.
there, right? Like, was that where that feeling was just so instantaneous? Like, it was just electromagnetic.
Yeah, that's a good question. I know the date, so let me.
Yeah. And then you got that 3420, and that 4323 is there to help guide you, right?
Mhm.
So, and then you both bring the power skills. Yeah, it's a good matchup based on what I understand so far.
Yeah, only one compromise. Obviously, I dominate it. I dominate the. I've got six. One, two, three, four. Yeah, I've got a lot. I've got all these where she's only got the this one down here. The no wait, that's her one, and then she's got no. That's our compromise. That's her dominant one.
Hmm.
But having that open G center, I think she really likes that I fill a lot of those things for her. I mean, I honestly, I think our relationship lasted as long and as good as it did just on our compatibility.
Hmm.
Once we like finally hit a little bit of a bump in the road, like a couple of years ago, we went and saw a therapist, and a lot of the things I was describing and she was describing, really like it's so clear now where they were coming from within their composite. But we didn't know. We were just like, we've been great forever, and now we're like having a little bit of a rough patch, and we don't know what to do. And and he gave some really good advice and really helped me like step away from some of the fixations I had. But he also said, have you without saying it in the context of being a licensed therapist, he said, have you, you might want to think about plant medicines, because they can really expose some inner truths that you guys maybe are avoiding, that you might not even want to bring up in a therapy session. And I said, oh well, that sounds terrifying, but my wife was like, yes, let me do that. I'm like, okay, great, go for it.
Well,
uh
and the date that she did that, I'd be curious to know if 57 was in transit. Because to me, there's something with that 57 in plant medicine that is an amplifier. So
hmm.
even, but you'd still have that experience anyways, but there are, it'd be interesting to see if your experience was different on a day where 57's in transit versus.
Yeah, that's a good question. My experience was on May 27th of this year, May 26th and 7th. So I wonder if how we find that out. But I'd look it up.
Yeah, I gotta get this reflector thing so I can bring neutrino design up. But anyway, would you be open to throw my wife's details up there and just comment on what you see? Because I'm
Sure.
always curious.
Always.
I just gotta check her birth time. I should almost memorize it by now, but
Do you need me to put a fake name in there?
no, her name's Wendy. Yeah, she's cool.
Cool.
So it's October 24th, 72. And the time, oh, I knew this, 6:07 p.m. And you're probably not going to find it. It's Canada, but she was born in Holberg, which was an old military base up at the top of the island that I don't even think exists anymore. So if you don't find that, do Port McNeil, because it'll be the same time zone. Yep, that'll work.
All right, there. That'd be
Wendy,
great.
right? Same open centers,
Oh
right?
yeah, she does. She's got the 35 to your 36.
Yeah.
You mean to do the composite, or you just want to look at this first?
Oh, we can start with that. I'd be curious to hear what you got to say to that. But she does. We completed 35, 36, and I think did I bring the 32? There's another one where yeah, I think do I bring the 32? Can you? I think that's one that I haven't actually explored much.
The 32.
I do. Yeah. Right? Yeah, I do. So and actually your wife and you have that one, right? The 32 and the 54? Oh no, you don't. So I've heard that one described as it's like the Beatles lyric, and I think John Lennon and Paul McCartney have both sides of that. But that
Mm-hmm.
lyric, it's getting better all the time, and
Mm-hmm.
then the response is couldn't get much worse. Like that, quite literally, is that engagement there.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting.
Yeah. So I'm, looking at this. She's obviously got some unique aspects of the you know tribal circuitry here going on. You
Hmm.
got these two pointing in on these is the egos. Oh wait, no, the defense circuitry, defense right here.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm feeling like obviously with this one, I think we were talking about the other night that transit probably is important for certain reasons.
You can just say it. Yeah, I literally, well, 59 comes in. I literally have an alert in Neutrino Design, and it's
Amazing. That's
it's
perfect.
mostly just to say, "Hey, babe, how you
Yeah.
feeling?"
And then this one comes off of that same circuitry, but this one is the one that like the like lays out and sort of is responsible for the distribution of resources. So
Hmm.
like, hey, this is what we've got. This is who gets what. Like, let's make sure everyone's got what they need. They're the fundraiser. They're the person that sorts of, you know, puts all that together. Do you see a lot of that playing out in her life?
Uh, Reluctantly, but I think that's been the 6 too. But she's starting to lean into that, and
Yeah.
that's what I've been trying to encourage without being
Yeah.
boss.
Well, and it's in her Saturn, and then it's a 4 line, so it's going to be the sort of opportunity to gathering together for the service of higher principles. So it doesn't necessarily always have to mean thing, but it's wanting to be expressed on the material plane.
Hmm.
Um, so that's something to know. And Saturn, I forget. Let's see. Saturn does. Let me see what Saturn. Saturn. I always forget exactly how these things go. Saturn is the discipline, the judge, the restraint. So it's the one that from if it's in her 45 as Saturn, that's telling me, and you tell me if you know differently, but it's like,
When judgment restraint. Yeah. Sorry, I was just
yeah,
yeah.
it's
Sorry.
wanting it's
There
wanting
again.
to like it's reluctant. It sounds like, or it's restraining from doing so.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's kind of playing out here. Like we built a business here in Brentwood, utilizing a space that we already own to build a wellness center, this funky
Mm-hmm.
town place. And it's somehow happened and made sense that she's administering it, and I'm the general, right? Like I come in and I'm either put out fires or create them.
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
James Dean's projector, we looked at our bodygraph, her bodygraph.
James
Actually, I
Dean.
remember I did a mystery meat sack, but I used Wendy as the mystery meat sack. So when we did that one, he kept talking about how it's our land and we let people feast off our land, but we get to keep the bigger piece. And
Hmm.
it's interesting how it's playing out. We're bringing practitioners in here at the space, and really we're just creating this space of connection for our community after COVID, and just being patient that we know and believe that it's going to work out. But
Yeah.
it's scary when there's debt attached to what the place used to be, and
Yeah.
trying not to force or push or be aggressive in marketing. Just if you build it, they'll come is kind of
Mhm.
the attitude I keep trying to take. But with both of us having an open route, there's that pressure to like, let's get this show on the road. We're in our 50s kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Well, you define the root together,
Yeah.
so that's interesting. The this 54 coming from her, and your 32 coming from you, defining that pressure. How do you feel that you know manifest? Like what aspect of your 32 and her 54 together are creating that sort of push to say like, no, like we gotta keep going, like we gotta move.
I'd say that it, that pressure was felt, but lately I've been pushing back. Like, where's the fire? Let's just
Yeah.
one thing at a time.
Hmm.
Where's the fire? And so,
So yeah.
and so she's also a generator when she sleeps. I'm a reflector, and so our beds are separated by about because we it's a small house. I can't have my own room. Um, but what a difference that makes, right? Like I used to wake up in the morning until we tried the sleeping separately experiment, and I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be like, "Where's the fire?" Like I was just like I woke up in a panic, but it was
Hmm.
because my body was in that relaxed, receptive, focused on love and death state while it's
Hmm.
being programmed in the evening. And but
Hmm.
meanwhile, my wife's dreams were like 8 hours of panically packing for a trip or washing dishes in a restaurant, right? Like her dream, she remembers her dreams. I don't, but
Hmm.
she would wake up exhausted from doing dishes for 8 hours in her sleep, right?
Wow.
So,
Yeah. Man, but I mean, I would just love to be in a room with you two together because this throat being like, there's so there's only two gates missing. Like, I just have to think. I mean, that and the direction. It seems like you know that this having this channel of being driven, like between the two of you,
mhm.
is just such a obviously being a one being a line one conservation, the other one being selectivity. Uh, the selectivity is hers, right?
Yeah,
54. And so the ingrained responsibility of maintaining security and personal identity that will naturally restrict its relationship to ones that are mutually beneficial. So she's very it sounds like she's very like she's okay whenever she needs to cut a relationship off of doing so. Is that right?
yeah. She doesn't cut me off necessarily,
Not you,
although
but like other relationships.
it's funny that that's like I was talking about the projectors, and there was one recently that just ended up being a really bad fit.
Hmm.
And I was the one that brought the projector into our life to help us with this business,
Yeah.
and I was pushing for it, and then she accepted. But I was also then the one going, "This person's crazy. This is not going to work out." And she was the one resisting letting them go until finally it was quite an interesting thing to even just observe and witness at the time.
Yeah.
It all checks out math wise, except for the not self, where you really are just overthinking, and
Hmm.
you just pay attention to mechanics. There's a lot there. So.
Yeah. Well, it's just interesting because I told you like how we my wife and I experience our emotions through this one. Learning how these types of things experience it for the composite or the for me my route is defined from her like in a couple of ways. Obviously, one through this channel, which is a compromise, this channel, which is electromagnetic, this channel, which is electromagnetic. But each one of these has its own way that it gets expressed for how we feel that pressure to to do something.
Mhm.
I was just interesting to see how it works out for you and your wife having this one instead. This one being more tribal, this one being more. Which one's this one? Is this the collective or is this the? I mean, look. How can I know if it's a what circuitry it is? I guess is this not have circuitry on it?
I'm not sure. It kind of seems when you're hovering over certain things. I don't know if maybe there's a way to show that there, but
Maybe it's in one of these things. So it's yeah. So view channel. No, it doesn't really tell me that. Interesting.
hmm.
I would love to know the circuitry on that because it seems like a. I bet it's in Neutrino. And are you
Right.
whenever you're going to do the Neutrino app? Are you just going to do the Are you just going to do an emulator and run it through your screen? Is that how you're thinking about it?
Well, yeah, I've been using this app called Reflector, which is what you thought I was talking about reflectors, but it's
Yeah.
called Reflector. And I used to be able to show the iPad on the screen as a
Mhm.
window, but for some reason, there's something about it. It just full screens the whole thing and takes over my Mac. So
Ah,
every time I try to do it, it makes me a little bit crazy. But so I got
yeah.
to figure it's nothing to do with Neutrino design. It just has to do with this sharing software that used to work brilliantly and now kind of sucks.
I
So
got you. Yeah, I've only ever I've used BlueStacks and a couple other emulators, but Reflector I've not used. But yeah, I mean this gate of struggle or this channel of struggle for us, that one has its very clear way. I'm the fighter, she's the game player.
Hmm.
Um, you know, for this one, I'm the one that has grace. You know, she's the one that's uh open, or she has caution, I have openness. So it's that has its own way. But this one, I think 952. Do you guys have that one too?
No, no. Got the
You do?
9, I think, but
Yeah, but no 52. That one definitely has its own you know, like I'm the focus, she's in action, but it's the channel of concentration.
mhm.
And you know, she's like having that having her gate 9, it's the one that like provides the sort of power to do that. You know, it's surprising that that's or sorry, mine's the 9. So I provide the power to do the focusing of the attention, and then the 52 of inaction is like her um being able to just stay still
Hmm.
and focused. Like I get the power to do it, and then so together she and I can like it's almost like the 21 or the 2034, but as a couple, she and I can be doing something together, and then we look up and it's been like 3 hours. We didn't realize it because we were so
Mhm.
focused on whatever thing we were doing. It doesn't
Mhm.
happen often because we have children, and they obviously rip that from us very very often. But it is cool whenever that one happens.
Yeah. Well, and so we both have the 731. You
Hmm.
probably heard me tell this, like use this example, but like we'll be bantering, like we think we're having playful, sarcastic banter, and we take little jabs at each other, and you do that after 30 years together.
Hmm.
Um, but other people will be like, "Whew, is it getting hot in here?" Like they're like really uncomfortable with our banter. Meanwhile, we're
Yeah,
like totally fine, right?
yeah, yeah,
Like they're
yeah.
watching like two moose like crash antlers, right? Like,
Hmm. But like you said, it's not a it's a it's a companionship. Like it's a or no, not companion. It's a what is it? Is it companion for y'all? Let's see. Yeah,
731.
it's a companionship channel. So it's something that you actually like share together, that you can do that with each other, and it doesn't if one of you was compromised, especially if it was coming from like the 7, if one didn't have the 31, that could be you definitely I could see someone being like, oh man, like this person's just getting dominated over there. They're trying their best to hang, but they can't, you know. But
But
since both of you have it, it's a balanced.
yeah, but I think obviously with my 8-1 and 3313, it ends up being like, much as that's not alpha, it definitely is this. I mean, I got something to say always. So,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
I love it. Fascinating. So, like,
cool,
and,
man.
and I mean, like as we talk about this, we're back to just human design, right? We're not talking about gene keys. We're not talking about other mutations. Like, there is a beauty and incredible insight into this, but
Yes,
what we
yeah,
take from it and
I
do more with it, I think, is that's key, right?
fully agree, man. It has a especially for people like me and you know, where we like to like take things and mess with them. We like to sort of roll them around in our hands and look at them and analyze and pull it apart and stretch it, deconstruct it. I think it's really fascinating. But what I would love to know, because and I'm sure the data is out there somewhere. You just have to find the right people. Like how many what combinations of the design and personality like create that sort of like bond with this type of thing in a way that is sustainable. Because like for me, everything else in my life has always been like I pick it up, I do it for maybe a year or two, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, cool, I'm gonna try something else now. Like like is this gonna be like that for me? Am I gonna get 3 or 4 years into the experiment as a manifesting generator who's like constantly jumping from one thing to another and being like, yeah, like I got a new sexy bride over here, and it's like something way cooler than that was. Like I just I'm very curious if you have thoughts on like sort of the sustainability of the personality and the person with this type of system versus one versus another, I guess.
Uh, I I think it's partly my addictive type personality, right? And that gate of fantasy too. And but yeah, I think what gives me comfort is that there's no end to the learning, right? Like I've dabbled not just in the human body graph, I'm super interested in the design of plants and inanimate objects and like those and the dream rave. Like it's like and then everyone mutating it anyways. I think that's what's exciting to me is just that 1% constant improvement and like I just don't see an end to learning about this. Whereas there's lots of things where it's like that's it. We know this. That's all we're the complacency of like that's the end of
Mm-hmm.
that line or that message
Mm-hmm.
is that's I think that's what excites me, and that's probably why I hope it mutates because that's what will keep it interesting and keep
Right.
right like that collective consciousness being shared will only make us all smarter and maybe we'll all show up a little better. If we all show up a little better, then shit gets sorted.
Yeah.
I had a really interesting conversation with a fellow on Facebook, and we end up having a chat afterwards. And I think he's been in design about 3 years, very like, but really went deep with it, and he's not bouncing around like me. But he's
Mm-hmm.
also very much like Jesus Christ, and like it's not for me, right?
Mm.
But we got talking about. He said something like when Jesus arrives, and my brain went to well, like is Jesus a white dude with a beard, or is Jesus already here and he's current or she is currently deconditioning? Like it was like maybe it's an Asian blind lesbian woman, right? Like that's like
Mm-hmm.
whoever. But what we kind of came to collectively on that was it's not one person. We got talking about like Christ consciousness, like
Mm-hmm.
collective consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
right? So are we just all deconditioning? And when Christ returns, is that really just everybody kind of? Because he basically was implying that 2027, the timing of that maps up to the Bible as well. So
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't really matter which angle you come at.
Mm-hmm.
There's something happening in that time frame
Mm-hmm.
that's good for all of us if we were willing to participate.
Yeah.
Right?
It's fascinating that you bring that up because Christ consciousness is something that if and when you ever explore some of the other channel texts like A Course in Miracles, the Course in Miracles is supposedly from the voice of Christ, like it's from the entity of Christ that is you know somewhere else in the universe that's expressing itself through this lady that had her same type of experience as Ra, if you want to call it that, where she just kept getting downloads from Christ and she wrote them all down, and it's it's enlightening by itself because I think it speaks to sort of some of those inner truths that we know about love and all that stuff. But it also like made me reflect on how just the story of Christ is such a universal one because for me with this whole experience with plant medicine, spirituality, human design, going from what I thought I was to who I really am, I was in a meditation, and I sort of had this like view of myself like about a year and a half ago. I was going through some really intense depression, very numb, just couldn't shake it. I was drinking all the time. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I was looking at myself on the couch, just this miserable, sad sack of shit, like, but only felt like such pride and compassion for that version of me because I knew that person. I knew and I'm talking about myself in the third person here, not to sound egotistical, but just to express the feeling and how intense it was that he was taking every step he needed to get me to the point and to get to the point where he could say, I surrender, I give up, I accept. And in doing so, sacrificed himself so I could live as
Mm-hmm.
the real me. You know, he
Mm-hmm.
basically said, yeah, I'm willing to die so that you can live. And I think that sort of, you know, I don't want to like say that we all have that sort of Christ analogy in us, but for me, it felt really real. Like I'm like, if there's one takeaway from the Christ, story, that's going to be it for me. Is like the dying on the cross wasn't or whatever. If he did or didn't bother me. It's the point that like we each have our own like self to get rid of that isn't us, that needs to sacrifice itself to be able to be who we really are, which is pure love, pure acceptance, pure graciousness, uh, pure compassion, like all of those things that we say, like I said earlier, are sort of cliche or bumper sticker stuff. It's like that's really what it is, man. Like,
Yeah,
so
we collectively need to. break the chain of getting shit wrong, right? For our genetic ancestry. Like
Mm,
you start, I've had a few. My wife booked a psychic reading, a
mm,
psychic reading kind of thing, and the woman, it was really more Wendy booked it, but the lady kept concentrating on me for some reason, and she kept saying like Wendy's dad was really proud of me and the work I'm doing, and
mm.
it was interesting because I was like mostly disinterested. No, I was interested, but I just wasn't expecting that,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was weird. But I think that's our job. That's in this incarnation is to clean up your shit, and then right, isn't that it? That's it,
Right.
really.
Yeah.
If we
Just
all clean up our shit,
see where it is, look at it, get rid of it, or not even get rid of it. Just, I mean, for me, all of my shit, all of my shadow work, or all that other stuff, for me is it's a portal to better awareness and understanding of my real self.
mm,
Like it's the thing that's going to teach me the most,
yeah,
and that's
yeah,
all there is to it.
move through it, right?
Yes, yeah. You don't avoid it. Don't begrudge it. Don't belittle it. Right. There is no bad part.
Mm,
Everything is good, and the things that you feel aren't good are probably the ones that are going to give you the most good.
yeah, yeah. There's a lesson in everything there. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, that open solar plexus to me, I think the one thing I've realized, and someone said it to me, and it was like it was another one of those things I need to hear, but like you need to be a filter, not a sponge, right? Because you
Mhm.
take all that with you and you absorb it, or you because you don't show up with your boundaries or with the things that could make things better. You just like, oh, I'll take this one for the team.
Mhm.
It's not necessarily a good thing. So
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree. The open solar plexus was the one I spent a lot of time with because I just did not get it. I mean, like because I'm like I've had my defense mechanism as avoidance, right? I don't I don't want to tell someone something they don't want to hear, and I don't certainly care if other people tell me something I don't want to hear. Like that never bothered me. I think that's maybe the defined G center or something. Like if someone gave me feedback, I was like, great, cool. But as soon as I had to turn that around and give it to someone else,
that's that's the rejection talking, right? That's
yeah,
that trauma, right? You don't
yeah,
want rejected.
exactly. I'm like,
Idea being rejected. It feels awful. Yeah.
yeah, and once I was able to see that for what it was, I was able to embrace, or I'm still learning it obviously, but I'm trying to embrace the value and the sort of real love that comes from being able to share something or reflect something back to someone that maybe is uncomfortable for them in a way that's compassionate, because for me there is no more compassionate love than tough love sometimes. Like it's
Mhm.
whenever you have to tell someone this is a boundary that I'm setting up right now because I love myself and I want you to understand that you can do the same for yourself. And this isn't, and it's not personal. It's vibrational, man. That's been a hard lesson to learn. I'm still working on it, but it's something I'm trying to be really conscious of every day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's super hard. Like I experienced that today with someone that was offering to do a reading for me. I think I mentioned earlier this cosmic HD
Mhm. Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
And this person was kind of shitting me with their like instead of just giving me the reading, they were giving me life advice and to look into things, and it was leaving pointing out the mechanics and starting to get into like tarot where you're speculating, and then that's that whole choice thing, like,
Hmm.
and even just the one thing that she said at the time kind of ruined my day because it was this like thing that didn't actually exist, but it
Mm.
made me reflect on something that like I just didn't think it was appropriate, and so I shared that like just hey, please stop that, and that was it. That was the end of the conversation and potentially relationship. Like could
Oh no. I mean, was it an acquaintance? It wasn't like someone you.
someone I've gotten to know, yeah, and really respect and admire,
Oh,
and
well,
offered to give me this reading.
then
Uh,
if you're speaking through the solar plexus, you can just give it some time, right? Let it breathe a little bit.
yeah, and 3-5 bonds made and broken. I kind of realized that that's my trip, man. But it
Yeah.
sucks. I feel like I've lost a friend,
Mm.
and I don't think I did anything wrong. So but and there's that shame where it's like I have to check in. Like, am I ashamed about my actions?
Mm.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
and I had to kind of step through that. But
Yeah. And then in sharing what you shared, you showed, great compassion.
tried, didn't land well. But I got to work on that messaging. I didn't say, hey, can I make it? Yeah, that was the problem. It was an exchange back and forth via like Messenger. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
in person, I would have been like, "Hey, can I make an observation?" If there was like a then I would have just been like, "Okay, I'm gonna hold that." For the same reason, this person shouldn't have been telling me things that they've seen
Mm.
that have nothing to do with what was going on at the time. Like
Right. Yeah.
I think the maturity or experience that this person hasn't figured out yet, and
Mm-hmm.
I was doing sharing that as trying to be helpful, but
Mm-hmm.
not land well. So there I
Yeah.
am,
That
loop friend again.
that's such an interesting point you make about how things get communicated, because whether it's through text or whether it's in person. In person is a little bit easier because there's more nonverbal, there's more body language being, I think, I don't know how much of our communication is nonverbal, but you're with your chart, like you've got so much of your throat on the sort of nothing pointed up, right? And that's the only one I've got, is I've got that 62, which is it's like the index for all of this. It's not the book, and it's the index. It has a list of it has all the words. It has
Mm,
every word, and then its job is to know exactly how to use them and where to use them and how to use them and why to use them, and how to. But I noticed that if I'm not using that gate through the openness of my solar plexus, it will just crash and burn. I will just sound pedantic, or I will just sound like overbearing, or you know there's a lot of ways I can use words to mess it up. But if I use the energy of that channel correctly, which is the sort of, in Gene Keys it talks about it as the gift of precision, right? You're able to use both what you're sort of understand from your mind, meaning all the words that I have, but with the heart, right? Speaking from the heart in a way that allows you to craft those words in a way that the person's going to feel them and not necessarily just hear them and think, right?
mm-hmm.
Um, I wonder if in your experience working with other people, if you found people that because even though you've got a defined throat, if there are others that have a defined throat where they maybe have more of these channels, not necessarily connected to the ajna, but like just hanging off of this, that have been symbiotic with you in any way.
That's a good question. I don't think I've looked at it that way before. I did get fixated on trying to find a projector with 4323, and that did not go well because I let everything be excused. I was just aiming for that channel. That
Mm-hmm.
was a mistake. No, I don't really have a response for that. It's interesting though that a friend of mine, her daughter is a self-projected projector, and it turns out that my wife's sister is as well.
Is that just the head and ajna?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, those are
And
those are those are fascinating to me.
right, no defined throat. And the one thing that kind of came, I don't know how I stumbled across it, but I ended up, I think, being a bit of a help was like a self-projected projector needs to hear themselves say things before they're comfortable.
They do. They'll say it out loud, and then they'll respond to that. Like it's like hey, if we could do the sacral test for ourselves, that's what they have to do with their head.
So it's like, why don't you speak it into your voice dictator on your phone
Mm-hmm.
and keep saying it until you like how it sounds, and then that's what you'll share, right? And
Mm-hmm.
my friend said her daughter would like if she's I guess uncomfortable. Like she can't speak. She literally can't speak because she needs to hear it before she's ready for others to hear it because she
Mm-hmm.
doesn't want it to land wrong.
Yeah.
So it was like that was the advice I got. Kind of like my wife's sister was already doing that, like figured
Mm-hmm.
that out for herself, even though she was unaware of her design whatsoever at the time. But
Mm-hmm.
being able to get that from my wife's sister and then pass that along to my friend's daughter felt really good. Like
Yeah.
just there's a there's a shortcut, right? And that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to universalize, provide
Right.
people the shorter path. So it kind of happened from my wife's sister through my friend's daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and that felt good. Just
That's
that
awesome.
there's your shortcut, right? Talk into
Mm-hmm.
your voice recorder on your iPhone, get
Yeah.
the way you like it, then say it. So
I yeah I hung out with an open throat manifesting, well, yeah, open throat generator this last weekend, and man, that is a lot. Like, it just all over the place, and I'm like, I'm telling you this because I like you.
Mhm.
Journal.
Journaling keeps coming up for me. I'm not a journaler.
You don't
As
need. You
far as
got to
writing,
define through it. You don't need to.
but
He needs to.
yeah, but I do, but I have to do it visually. So I use like Canva. I'll just like draw a piece,
That's
like,
cool. Whatever works for you. This person, I'm like, you need to write things down a lot because it'll help you be more coherent. Like it'll help you practice coherency in when you're trying to communicate. Because he would just, I mean, I do the same thing. Like I can ramble and I can get off task, but I mean, this guy was just one of, and you're like, okay, like, I'm trying to follow you. I'm like journal a lot more, and then also like just remind yourself at the end of your thought, is there a way I can ask a question to the other person? So that way
Mhm.
it's not so it's not just one way.
Was this the person that you pinged me about when you were at that weekend and you were saying like, look at this person's chart, just give me a couple of things to ask?
I
Because
might have, yeah. Which I forget which one it was, but I sent you two or one at least. There was two that I'd interacted with like that.
I
Um,
remember you saying like, and I remember because we talked about this in this conversation, but you asked me to comment in the chart,
mhm.
and part of me wanted to go into like analyst mode and be like, oh, I'll put an hour into this, and instead I was
Oh,
just like doing my parlor tricks, like just
yeah,
ask
yeah.
that, say this, say that,
Mhm.
and but of course I don't get to hear like, did it land,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But
Well,
like, did you bring this person online in that experience with some of those parlor tricks?
well, so this was a different person than the open throat person, but yes,
Hmm.
I did bring a lot of this out in our conversation, and he was a very just kind of a quiet, like you could just very solid dude. Like he was just like he was probably the least talkative person there, but he was the always in his own head, and he shared that he's like, yeah, man, like I'm always in my own head. I have a hard time really expressing any of this stuff. So as I was sharing some of those things, he was like, this is freeing for me because I always felt like I've just not had the way to explain some of these things that you're explaining, and it gave him a lot of like courage almost because he's got a lot of things that he's been working through. He lost his older brother a couple of years ago. He's like has this really bad skin condition that he's been dealing with, and he's the 6'3" I was talking about too.
Oh
Right.
wow, there's a double
So
three again, right?
yeah, and he's
There's
a quad right.
Whew.
So yeah. So he was like, if you could just say like, yeah, like this person, he's got a lot of energy. He's only missing one channel to have a completely fully defined by channel ego center. So like every single one of them, the only thing he was missing was the 21 gate. Every other gate was all there. So he was a super competitive athlete. Had all these other things that like had been motivating for so long, and now he's in his like mid 30s. He's like he just doesn't even know what he's supposed to do anymore. He has no understanding of like where to put that willpower and where to put that energy because he doesn't know how to communicate anything, and especially about himself. And so some of those things that you mentioned, some of those voice memos you gave, I sort of just let him hear. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna let my friend, who's, if it's all right with you. And he was like, yeah, sure, no problem. And he's like, that lands in such a way that a lot of this, any of this other stuff really hasn't. He's been through all the mushroom ceremonies and everything else, like we talked about, but he's like, this felt like it was coming from within me, as it was being spoken, whether it's from you or from me. So yeah.
that's the encouragement I need to hear, and remind me to get in and get out, like just enough, and maybe find it. Like, I wonder if that's my role. Like I'm almost meant to be like a little shock, but then
Conduit.
hand it to the people at the 5 1s and the 3 1s that actually have read everything. Because I'm sometimes I only know as much as I've experienced so far. But
Yeah, I'm the same way, man. But what is interesting, I even though I don't have a single one line in my whole damn chart, like
none. Wow.
people are like, oh, that's surprising. I'm like, well, it's not really surprising for me because my son is 62, and it's the details. Like he wants to know all of the words that I possibly can. And
Yeah.
I mean, this is a take I hadn't heard before, but one of those Parkin Chetan guy, one of those early OG dudes from back in the day, they said that six, oftentimes when they're coming online, they'll feel the need to go 1 through 5 first. They need to understand all of it before they can feel like they're at their sixth level.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, well, even though I don't have a one line, I feel like I'm sort of getting there through osmosis through my other gates, channels, and whatnot, and lines.
Sure, yeah, you have no ones. Lots of twos and fours and sixes.
Mm-hmm.
So just naturally connected, naturally gifted, and then there's that six. Um, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have five ones. I never. Only recently was I even paying attention to that. So I was a little surprised to see that, but it does kind of make sense. There are areas where I go deep, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's very interesting. I love it. Could do this all day.
Yeah, I mean, we've been here 3 hours now. It doesn't feel like it's like we are our 2034 has time dilated us into
Hmm.
very small amount of time. Feels like.
Yeah, my bladder is telling me that it's been
That's
3 hours.
good. It's your roots openness is trying to tell you, hey, feel some pressure.
Yeah, time to put a pin in it, maybe. That was awesome, man. Why don't we cut it there? I'll do this again sometime too. So, but
Yeah, maybe and
um,
maybe we'll do like some non 3 hour, like more like quick hit stuff that we can on the fly wherever it makes sense. I'm glad to jump in. This is I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk with you about this. This is I don't really have many opportunities to have this kind of forum, so it's
yeah,
really cool that you put the work in to set this thing up.
yeah. Thanks, man. No, I appreciate you being here too. All right, I'm gonna go pee. That's how you end a podcast, and
Being we go.
we'll catch you on the Discord, man.
All right, buddy. Talk to you
All right,
later.
see you.